Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever or whenever you may be. This is the overnight. I am DM Foss, and joining me is Baron. How are you doing, Baron?
I am feeling very animated today.
We're glad to have you here.
Glad to be here. We have a thrilling topic.
It is. We're going to talk about kind of the history of gun laws with what's going on in Washington State right now. It kind of brings us all back up and got us thinking about it. So I thought we'd go through kind of a thumbnail sketch of the history of gun laws. Not too detailed, but, I read an article from 2018, I think it was, Time did, on the history of gun laws, and that's kind of what I used as a template. So we'll just kind of go through bit by bit. And G-Webs, I sent you an invite if you want to jump in or not. So let me do the stuff I'm supposed to do before I forget to do it. So there's the email if anybody wants to email anything in. Gunmetal Guy USA and Sharon Hinchcliffe. Let me send you an invite too, Sharon. Oh, actually, there's one in Discord, in the Discord, if you want to jump in. Or if you're busy, that's all right. And then if you watch this in replay, go ahead and leave a comment. You can kind of keep the conversation going. And I love to see comments, and I always respond to them. And for everything that we're covering, there's links in the description to each of the laws, so you can go and, if you choose to, read what the laws are and what they cover. And then we're mainly going to deal with the federal laws, just because there's so many different little state laws that I didn't feel like getting into it. And then there's a couple of the Supreme Court decisions that we'll throw in. And let me do one thing here real quick. I put out a poll.
We do love a good poll.
And I always forget to talk about the poll. Oops. There we go. So let me share the poll screen. Down. So I asked, how are the gun laws in your state? We got 91 votes. 24% said good. 12% said bad. 15% said okay. And 48% said all gun laws are infringements. Every state has bad gun laws. And then,
so half of them failed that question.
Well, yeah, no, I think it's valid from a point of view. But Mandicary said he wouldn't know. He doesn't bother to find out anymore. Unit 031397 is in Washington State.
My sympathies.
They're bad and getting worse. The self-defense protections are actually impressively robust. Centurion 10.6 is in New York. Luckily has a carry permit. AR gun 1776. I believe he's in Georgia. We're a more pro-gun state, and I hope it stays that way. Stacey Adams gets selected. It won't be. Two Gun Kitty is in Texas. Good but not perfect. Need to do away with the 30-06 and 30-5. Those are signs businesses can put up to make their establishments no gun
zones,
and they carry the weight of law. Like in Washington State, they don't carry the weight of law. But if you're asked to leave, then
what if
you have
you're blind in Texas?
Well, that's I think it was Guns and Barbecue that asked about that. Or are they in Braille? Sergeant Joe Smith is in Arkansas. Says no permit, open or concealed carry. Stand your ground. Enhanced permit for carrying in churches, colleges, bars. No permit to buy. No wait time to buy. Shoot outside city limits on your own property or property you have permission to be on. Class 3 state. Drive around on a moped under 50cc with a full auto and suppressor with no driver's license, registration, license plate, or gun permit, other than ATF Class 3 form.
Oh, it must be nice to live in America.
For those who don't know, if you have 50cc or under mopeds, probably different in different states, but like for Washington State, you just need a driver's license. You don't need a motorcycle license. And it sounds like Arkansas, you don't even need that.
It's like a bicycle.
Kind of. Freedom Reigns is in Texas. Could be much worse, but could be better too. Kevin Young, California. The Misfit Darling, upstate New York. Could be worse, but it's pretty bad. 2A We Stand is in Florida. Darren Kidney is New York State. Well, thanks to everybody who participated in the poll. I try to put one up every week, especially the week of a chat. I try to get a poll up having to do with the chats, but I appreciate everybody that chimed in.
Yeah, that's some good feedback.
Oops.
So how many of those were from Washington? 2?
Was there 2? I know at least one.
Huh.
I closed it out. So
it must be 1 in the morning. Speaking of Washington, I don't know if we've said this on the show, but one of our, she's a senator. She's one of our representatives for the state in the Washington State House or Senate. I don't know which one it is, but
the one from Renton.
It might be. But she has my new favorite quote. Constitutionality is in the eye of the beholder. Whatever the fuck that means.
That means that she's going to ignore the Constitution. That's what it means.
Probably.
Basically, she's saying, I'm going to ignore the Constitution. What are you going to do about it?
Yep. And she said it with a grin on her face. Like, man.
Yeah.
She's a nice lady.
Sergeant Joe Smith is out there. I do sleep. I sleep in between times when nobody's looking.
I got a full hour of sleep before the show.
But, uh-oh. I closed the window for the article. Hang on here just a second. Now I got to find it again. There we go. All right. So this is the... There we go. This is the Time article.
And that's the Senator Patty Kuderer. I don't know how to say that.
Yeah. So, good morning, Mr. Websites.
Good evening. Good morning. Thanks for hosting.
So we're just going to kind of go through each of the...
what was the date of this? You said 16?
The article came out in 2018, and then they updated it in April of 2019.
Yeah, they just, I guess, on one of the Brady bill, they had a mistake, so they corrected it in 2019. But it originally
came out that he was killed.
Yeah.
Originally, and they corrected that.
Whoa, that's pretty sad. Considering, well, I guess the people that wrote it weren't necessarily alive. I was going to say, considering that it was in our lifetime. You know, like I can see being wrong about, you know, something at Washington or, you know, World War I or something. But
yeah, when that happened, I wrote Reagan a letter. I would think I was in 6th grade, saying I'm sorry that somebody shot him, and I got a lovely form letter back from the White House, which I wish I still had. I don't know what happened to it.
Was that like part of school, or you just felt like doing it?
Nope, just did it because as a kid, I liked Reagan.
Was that like, hey, Mom and Dad, look what I'm doing? Or you just literally just did it one day and no one knows you did it except you?
No, I just decided I wanted to write a letter because I was sorry somebody shot him, and then asked my mom to mail it.
Nice.
And which getting a form letter I thought was really neat because my friend who had written the White House sometime before that only got a form postcard. So I thought my letter was better.
Cool. I didn't even know that was a thing. Like, definitely not when I was a kid, you know?
Yeah. Like I said, I wish I would have been able to keep that. But 1791, you've got the 10 amendments to the Constitution, which the Bill of Rights, and in that is the Second Amendment, the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
That was just a suggestion, though, right?
Well,
Well, the way that they go on the, what do they say, on the 10th or the December 15th, as if like, oh yeah, we also remembered to put in a Second Amendment, but that was of course debated like a lot of things, and it was thought about until they had the correct wording. But again, if their probably focus is to talk about how great the laws are, probably, right, and like how, you know, how they help us or something, they're probably not scrutinizing them or trying to put them in actually any kind of light. You know, they're trying to. I'll shut up. I could definitely talk forever about all of these, so I'll try not to go off on too many tangents.
no,
Since we're only in the Second Amendment at this point.
I appreciate any input.
It is pretty amazing. We made it all the way to 1934 before we had the first piece of gun control federally.
176 years. But I think technically there's some things in between, but nothing major for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
there's
like
definitely
court cases about individual, because in that time there was already some gun laws. The first gun laws in 1911 with New York, and there's some things before that, like black codes, where they brought stuff to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court was like, oh yeah, whatever. Like they weren't really paying attention. So there's a couple of things, but you get into the weeds for sure. It's like smaller things that court cases, basically.
Yeah, I started to look into like the Old West. I can't remember if it was Dodge City, Tombstone, but I meant to write that down.
Well, those are cities. Those are really tough.
Yeah.
Because that's literally like some guy just came up with it, wrote it on a piece of wood. Maybe somebody took a picture or documented it, but you know, some laws could have existed that never got archived, so to speak. So
Yeah,
all we really have is state laws to look at.
That was part of it. There wasn't a lot of information, and I would just wanted to look it up because those are examples that people bring up to say that there have always been gun laws. Well,
right.
Yes, they were there, but no, they shouldn't have been there. You know,
right. And that was one town out of 7,500 towns or something, and that doesn't mean that they work. They just, you know, we know about the lore.
Was it even a state when that was a law?
Oh no, this
was it just a territory
and stuff. Yeah, this is just.
There was one of the articles, short articles that I read, said that when after Tombstone, I think it was Tombstone, when they enacted that, the murder rate went up, but it went up from like 2 to 5.
Yeah, but still failed policy. But they're going to still tout it as though it has some significance or some reason to exist because it's old.
Good morning, Sharon. How you doing?
Good morning. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right.
Sounds good.
Just to make sure, I'm going to try and see if I can turn the speakers off. I'm on my laptop. The husband is sound asleep upstairs where I normally do any kind of the video stuff or anything else. That's also why you're not seeing me on anything because I'm down in my living room. So, yeah, Patty Kruger, sorry, I missed some of the stuff trying to get everything set up, is a special beast, to say the least. And so she's the one who said, we were all freaking out, as you all know, when she said that.
I'll be right back.
It's in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah, that's
there's somebody in Washington that said that.
Yep.
Yeah, she's a Washington State senator, so local on that. And she's also right now one of the biggest authors of the gun control bills as directed by Attorney General Ferguson. Since he technically cannot write a bill, it has to be submitted by a sponsor, but she can do stuff for him and things like that.
Yeah, if you ever see a clip of her, I think there's one on the Washington Civil Rights Association YouTube channel, isn't there?
Yes, there should be.
It's awful.
Is it? I don't know the terms for it. Is it like a disconnect? Like they know, but they just do a mental disconnect to leap over to these things, or is it they like literally don't realize, or do you think that they really don't realize this? I don't want to say slippery slope, but like the direction they're taking the world into when they, they petition some of these crazy ideas.
Part of it is you have a group of individuals, and this is going back probably to the early 1900s. And these are a bit, so you all going to get a history lesson today. This is going back to the early 1900s, where you had the beginning of the formation of the eugenics movement, which actually started here in the United States. And this is where you had a group of very wealthy, very powerful individuals who believed that they knew better because they were the more educated and the wealthy and ran certain businesses than others, and should be able to tell those individuals how to live their lives, and would put laws through to have controls put on others' lives. One of the first of these bills that came out was the Sullivan Act of 1911. This is a bill that is still active today in New York City, and this is the one that targeted the new immigrants that were coming into the country at the time, after the American Civil War had fully settled. This bill was only used to prosecute Italian immigrants, Irish immigrants, and anybody from Eastern Europe.
But then free bonus they get to apply it to all the freed slaves that they feel like also.
Yes, they also did target them also. Now, what's interesting is one of the most heinous bills that we have, or heinous decisions that ever came out of the Supreme Court, Dred Scott, and I'll have to find this and send it to y'all. You'll find this very interesting. There's a section of Dred Scott where they actually talk about how a free black man has the right to pray and to assemble and to participate in any political activity that they want while carrying and bearing any arm that they wish. That is buried in Dred Scott. Before the Civil War, before Heller, before McDonald. So when we hear a lot about them saying that the Second Amendment's not an individual right, Dred Scott actually calls it out, saying that it is. It's one of the craziest things. So I'll have to find that. I have a screenshot of it, and I'll send it over to y'all onto your thing.
Right. So the way I understand it, and I'm definitely not an expert, but in 1857 is Dred Scott. So basically they go, hey, is this African American guy who basically just wanted to move, right? Like he wanted to move somewhere with his family or something like that. And they're like, oh, you can't just move. So they're like, hey, is this guy a legal citizen or not? And they're like, oh, no, because if he was a legal citizen, he'd have the Second Amendment right.
Yes.
So it's sort of a backward slap in the face, like, oh, no, this guy doesn't have rights, because if he had rights, then he would have rights.
Exactly.
And it's like, oh, well, if you're going to use that as your thing, then you just set precedent that when we get past this glitch, everybody's got rights.
Yes.
And everybody chooses to forget that part.
Yep. That's exactly it. And it was one of the most, when you actually dive into that bill, it really goes into a lot of that. And that was one of the more interesting things when I was diving into it, into a lot of the stuff that we go through. And especially when everyone says, oh, well, Heller was the new one. Heller is where the Second Amendment became an individual right. And let me see if I can. Speakers changed out so I can hear better, and so maybe you guys don't have any feedback. But that's where it came from. That's exactly, and so it predated. Now, after the Civil War and everything, you had a couple of really bad bills, and one of them a lot of us have heard recently, and that was Jacobson. Jacobson, I believe, predated 1934 with the NFA. Jacobson v. Massachusetts. This is where the Supreme Court sent back to the state of Massachusetts that the public health, and this is where that the state has the right to forcibly have you take a drug or medication. Jacobson actually is being misused in a lot of people. Jacobson is where they're saying about a mandate. This is where they're trying to get the mandates from, where they're saying like, well, the state said under Jacobson that you could be forced to have it. Jacobson, they were only fined, and it was, I believe, either $5 or $50. I can't remember, but it would have been the equivalent, about $500 today, and it was a one-time fine, and he still didn't have to take the smallpox shot. Difference between then and now, smallpox shot had been around for over 100 years, and actually probably close to 200. It had been proven to work, and it was discovered via milkmaids who were not catching smallpox. I want to say it was either in England or Scotland. And it was somebody who made that observation and realized that they would get something known as cowpox. And when a milkmaid developed cowpox, one of the scientists, and I cannot remember his name, decided to use the infectious material from the boil from the cowpox and inoculated somebody with it and exposed them to smallpox. Lo and behold, they didn't get it. Cowpox and smallpox are very genetically similar. So that's where the smallpox vaccination developed from. And it was proven that that particular vaccination, also coming from vacca, Latin for cow, if I recall correctly, for that. So you move up a number of years from Jacobson. You come up to Buck v. Bell. And this is where you have many people who have been arguing on this, because if the government is able to force you to have a procedure, they can force you to be sterilized medically. Buck v. Bell was Carrie Buck, and I believe it was, I'll have to take a look at the year that case went through. But the horrible part about that is you had a young woman who was the third generation, 1927 is when that one came out. And where you have a young woman who was forced into the foster care system after her mother had also been mentally institutionalized. And her grandmother had been mentally institutionalized also. And this is, like I said, the height of the eugenics movement. And you had some physicians and politicians who proceeded that we needed to stop having, to quote from them, imbeciles having imbeciles and populating and having children that they cannot take care of, that the state has to take care of. So this particular case, they went through to have this young woman forcibly sterilized. And this came out of Virginia. Now we go. And Carrie Buck was pregnant, and they decided to force her to have an abortion and then force her to be medically sterilized with a hysterectomy. Went all the way up to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court said yes, for the public health, we will forcibly sterilize. That decision has never been overturned. Yes, exactly. What DJ Play Nice put in. The states may sterilize. So imbecility is a very, very nebulous term, and feeble-mindedness. Now that they're going back on this, they think that Carrie Buck had been sexually molested as a young girl and had been raped, and from that pregnancy was a rape. The horrificness of this bill is that it still stands. You allow Jacobson to continue to be held as precedents. Your next step is Buck v. Bell. It's already there. So when the anti-gunners go off on some of their stuff with the Fourth Amendment, with the red flag laws, the danger of those red flag laws go right back to Buck v. Bell, where the state can override due process, force somebody to have their rights violated. One of the reasons why I was not happy to see Amy Coney Barrett be selected as the Supreme Court Justice, Barrett supported using Jacobson in the federal court for the federal district court that she was in prior to being appointed as the Supreme Court Justice for the restrictions and the lockdowns in the state that she was in, which is Fourth Amendment violation. I don't trust her.
I think it's dangerous that, well, how close they dance to some of these laws that they're okay with because they don't give it any due diligence to scrutinize, I guess, the laws when they're offered to the anti-side, like, oh, they're in such a rabid fever to get rid of our property or create, infringements so that we can't own property in the first place, that, they dance super close to jumping over the line between, well, what do we call them, safe or decent laws and like laws that can be used in so many ways atrociously.
Yeah, it really, really is.
What you're saying about Comey Barrett, what?
Yeah, Amy Coney Barrett, otherwise known as ACB.
Yeah, is the kind of what I've been saying is right now with some of the gun laws that are going on, everybody is looking to the Supreme Court because it's considered more conservative to fix these laws. But the problem is it all depends on the makeup of the court. So right now it might be more conservative. In 10 years, it might be less conservative and be more willing to overturn any good works that are done.
Yeah.
This is why I push for getting more people into the Second Amendment community. Make it broader, get everybody in, whether you agree with them politically or not, because I believe it's the only real way to protect that right is for everyone to vote for that right. If we're just waiting on the courts, you look at the Ninth Circuit, the way it is. You cannot depend on that to always be the way, the way it is now for the Supreme Court. And even with it being more conservative, you never know how they're going to rule.
Yeah. The issue with depending upon the courts to decide and wait for a decision is risky. Otis McDonald, who sued the city of Chicago, is proof of that. The gentleman passed while the case was waiting between whatever, I can't remember if they're the Fifth or the Seventh, with the Fifth or the Fourth Circuit appellate to the Supreme Court. After he had lost the case there and was appealing it to the Supreme Court, he passed. Unlike Miller, that was very clear of what was going on with this. So the Supreme Court did take the case. I'm not a fan as much of using Heller, even though it was the first major case. McDonald did everything that Heller did, but has the one caveat that cannot be used against the rest of the country that Heller has been used. You'll hear a lot where Heller has stated that that's just for the district, it's just for federal properties. Well, McDonald, a few years later, was against the city of Chicago. And with the city of Chicago, that actually applies to the rest of the country under the 10th and the 14th Amendments.
Yeah, they used selective incorporation,
Mm-hmm.
which will apply the federal law to states, basically.
Yes.
Yeah, I made notes on that one.
But
Good
still,
one.
He
Rhonda's had to
filed.
take them to task twice, basically. So it's not as though it's black and white or cut and dry where, hey, leave us alone, and now everybody's going to leave us alone. They're going to interpret it or misinterpret it.
Mm-hmm.
McDonald filed his case the same day that Heller decision came out. As soon as that decision came out, he filed his petition.
Yeah.
I think you were mentioning the danger or the negative sides of letting bad law happen and then fighting it in court, which is the strategy of people who really are down with that, who have the skills, or lawyers, right? Like organizations are built to that end. So it's like one of those, if all you have is a hammer, all you know how to do is hammer, everything you start to see looks like a nail to you. So I've always thought that, but I think the other negative side of the coin or whatever would be that we have to live with those laws. We have to live with infringement. And I guess you could look at the bright side of that and say, then at least everybody gets a taste, but that's a horrible, I don't want to wish people having to deal with infringement in order to appreciate the lack of infringement. I'd rather use words and describe infringement so we don't have to ever live under tyranny. But either some people in states or all of us are living under some sort of infringement when we depend on court cases to remove future infringements, right? I think that's a dangerous,
and
unnecessary strategy to wait for bad laws and then attack them in court after they already happened.
And I think for us in the Second Amendment, the gun community, when you talk to other gun people, it seems like everybody thinks the same way that you do, but most people don't give a shit about guns. They don't. The gun community is relatively small, even though there's however many millions. Comparatively speaking, for the population of the U.S., there's not a lot of us, and most people don't really care. And even in the gun community, there's people that don't care. They've got their thing, what people call FUDs. They've got their whatever, and they're fine with. They don't care about like bump stocks. I don't like bump stocks. I don't care about bump stocks, but it sets a bad precedence. That was another thing that I kind of looked up to see where that was at. It's in limbo, but so that's why the reaching out to people, bringing people, getting more people in, and helping them understand why it's important to care.
One of the things that I was never really a big fan of bump stocks until I was down in Olympia. Oh, I want to say, God, this was probably 6 years ago, 7 years ago, maybe, whenever it was coming up in Washington here for us on the bump stock ban, because we actually do have one that predates the federal stuff. And there was a gentleman who was testifying, and his hands were crippled. And he was actually impaneled. This was when we still had Keely Hopkins as our NRA ILA rep. And Keely got this gentleman impaneled, and it was a combination of rheumatoid arthritis and something else. I mean, his hands clawed is the best way I can describe it. He could not operate any other firearm except for the AR-15. But because he doesn't have the ability to hold it the way the rifle was designed, there's recoil issues. The bump stock alleviated those recoil issues and allowed him to be able to defend his life. Senator Jamie Peterson at the time, and this is for the Senate Law and Justice Committee, sneered when this guy was testifying, at least in my opinion, which just infuriated me to no end. Didn't seem to care that Washington was pushing a bill through to become law that would violate the human dignity and the human rights of a man who was physically disabled. And this is where I learned that the ADA, under the federal protections, doesn't cover this. There is nothing under the ADA that protects someone who is disabled from being able to defend themselves from undue or unjust laws. That was unbelievably frustrating. So while I don't like bump stocks, I'm not a fan of them, there are people who need them. And yet we still are having these laws pushed through. So.
Yeah, the same would apply to braces too.
Mm-hmm. Yep. In fact, there's going to be a few photos of me coming out soon as I have time. So probably after Sendai, of me walking with my cane. Because those of you in Washington who have seen me, you know I walk with the cane. With my Bren and the brace. And I'm like, I can't walk over uneven terrain without my cane. So I need the brace. So we're going to have some photos and some video of me walking with my brace on, using my Bren, and I'll be using my cane.
And the ruling for that comes out in, was it August?
I believe so. But I think the ATF is trying to... I think that's the ATF ruling. Am I right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Actually, I
you'd
don't
think,
know if it's a
right?
ruling.
We just know what the Federal Register has a 08 or whatever, like 06 and 08. So we don't know what that's the
What they're gonna
the 0th of August is, right?
Yeah. So I'm sure you guys have seen what we're facing in Washington. Virginia has something going called an RFL. I'm not sure what that is. But they're fighting, according to Joe from Mom at Arms, they're fighting against it, is my understanding, for something that's going on concurrently up at their legislature.
I don't know.
Yeah, let me see and send it over to, if I have anything on that. For this, let's see. Yeah, fighting RFLs. I'm not sure what that is. But that's, and I'll send that over to you guys. This is the big gun websites. I'll send that to you on Instagram because it'll be easier for me to send it over to you that. And because their whole thing is all two AIs, and she posted this a day ago. She's like, all two AIs should be on Washington and Virginia. Both states are facing people control legislation in the next few weeks. Washington mag bans and Virginia fighting RFLs, where U2A defenders call emails. Not in Washington or Virginia. Tell a friend, spread the word.
Probably red flag laws, huh?
You know what? That's what it is. That's what it is.
Because now that you say it that way, right? That's what it's.
Yeah. That's exactly what it is. And something that I've been telling people from out of state, especially in border states, is to email, especially when it was the committee members that we had, their information, was to email the committee members and saying, like, this makes me not want to go to Washington for
Oh,
tourism.
no, we're both wrong. Tupperware is saying RFL equals restricted firearms license.
Ooh.
Well done, antis, with your stupid letter things. Almost
Yeah.
got it past us.
Yeah. And so I've been telling people, especially in Idaho or something like that, we've got some great training centers here, which means housing, especially down at the Firearms Academy of Seattle, which is closer to Vancouver now than Seattle. But that's because that's where they found a great piece of property at the time. In Onalaska, I think that's how you pronounce it, Washington.
Alaska.
Yeah. And it's like, if you take any classes down there, you end up going into housing and everything. So rent hotels, things like that. Anybody coming into the state is paying a housing tax, a hospitality tax. That goes right to the state coffers. Anything with rental cars, things like that, right into the state coffers. And they listen to tourism dollars because that's technically free money that they don't plan on, that adds in the budgets and things like that. So I was telling people from out of state, tell them you're not going to come visit. Oh, we were planning for this trip and we're not coming now. We'll take our dollars elsewhere.
I think there's a lot of power in that. Once we figure out that we can push our weight around, once we know what our weight is as tourists and people doing business and consumers of products from other states and stuff, like we could be pretty powerful.
We can be.
We'd have to be incentivized with some like wins, like some understanding that this little bit of effort here has a consequence or is appreciated. And I know that's happened before, but there's not enough focus on it. We've got a lot of individuals still that are like, hey, listen to me tell you about what's going on, instead of let me tell you about what's going on and appreciate when people hear about it. It's more like, hey, hear about it from me. And I think that's detrimental to some extent, or maybe it's just an aspect that we haven't seen it successfully happen enough times that it's become kind of our, one of our things to do. So I think once it's happened a few times, it'll be tougher for anybody to prevent it from happening in the future. It's kind of like a rally. If somebody's like, oh, the rally's my idea, so show up to my rally, that's different than show up to the rally. And once some successful rallies happen, it's really difficult for somebody to say, show up to my rally again, right?
Yeah.
Now it's all just rallies. And then you get the problem with people showing up to scab off the rallies. But anyway, that's a whole other thing. But I think there's a limit there that sometimes we just need to see it happen for the first time, or have enough light shined on it when things happen small.
I know I'll be at the march. The Seattle and Tacoma chapters of Pink Pistols will be at the March for Our Rights rally. I guess they're calling it the Grit Rally.
It's a stupid name.
Yes, I'm not a fan of it, but we will be there.
I want to go. I'm not sure if I'll be there or not.
We'll be there. The organizers actually gifted us a booth space, which was very nice of them. And we greatly appreciate that. And so we've got myself and 3 others who will be there the entire time, taking off work early that day or that night before, so I can be semi-functional. Because you saw me down at the GRC rally. Sometimes not very, and that was having 2 days off, so beforehand, but it gets to be a little crazy. But that's also was a rally while working in the middle of the legislative session. A little crazy.
You did a good job, though.
Yeah, thank you. So So we'll be there, and then I have to fill out the paperwork for the Squim Logging Festival, and we'll be out there in May. And then I'll see what the scheduling is for everything else. But, and you're talking about like getting the word out for stuff. Really, getting the word out and getting outside of the 2A community, I think, is key anymore in stopping a lot of these bills and in stopping a lot of this stuff.
And it's easier than ever before with new gun owners. That means people that aren't like, oh, guns are my thing and that's my only thing, and I've been doing this thing my whole life, and now I'm offended by somebody that's coming along and misunderstanding us or misrepresenting us. Now it's like regular person decides to buy a gun, sees what it's like compared to what their impressions or their thoughts might have been.
Mhm.
And now when somebody comes up with something new, they hear from hopefully activists that are out there getting the word out, right? And there's some big ones, at least people that re-amplify stuff that gets out there. So anyway, now these new gun owners hear it, and hopefully, because again, they're not like, oh, all my friends are at the range. Like, I don't know anybody that's not into guns personally. I don't know, like, I just don't. All my friends are gun people, pretty much. Even people, I guess my family, right? It might not be into guns as much as my friends. But then there's this new gun owner, XYZ, right? That person decided to buy a gun, found out that gun owners aren't that bad, or found gun owners that they can like. And now something happens, and she's like, hey, friends at work or friends at church or friends at civic organization, you might not realize this, but I just bought a gun last year, and now they're trying to take our right to own a gun away. You might not want a gun, but you know what I mean? They're going to have a whole different message. So I think we haven't even seen what the potential is with, these new gun owners are not necessarily activists, but there's a lot of potential. And I'm not saying that all we got to do is click our heels and they're going to activate, but I'm just saying that's a new variable. We've never had that before, that element to the whole thing.
Yeah,
I agree with you.
you
100%.
heard
And they-
stories about that.
They didn't buy a gun because like grandpa told me to buy a gun, or I just have the gun from grandpa. They decided in 2020s, whatever year it was, to buy a gun in this climate. So they have to be politically aware, at least aware, if not, with an opinion. Okay, I'll shut up.
Yeah, I heard a few stories from people who knew people that did that. Were buying their first guns because everything that was going on in the last couple of years, and were surprised at what they could or couldn't do because they didn't have any idea. What, I can't just take this home right now?
And they tell that to us, and we're like, yeah, we knew about that. And then they're going to be like, well, that's no fun. I'm going to go tell my other friends who don't know about this, and they're going to understand my plight. Are they going to care, right? Like, because we already knew.
Yeah.
Or in Washington, they're like, I need to have training to buy a semi-auto rifle? What's that about? It's like, yep.
I need to have training to buy a Ruger 1022.
Yep.
Or like, you're calling me you're skeptical of me, the decision I'm making, right? Like, that has to be a thing too, because most people aren't like, oh, I care about everybody. Most people are like, what now? You're calling me dangerous, or like you're implying something about me because I'm buying a 1022, which is, for people that don't know, a gun that grandparents buy their grandkids is maybe a first gun, or like, I don't know, somebody might buy for like fun in the backyard. It's like a step between a BB gun and a hunting gun or something. So it's not like an assault gun or anything. It's like a toy that has a lot of bullets in it, like a BB gun has a lot of bullets in it, but they're tiny bullets, and it's not a toy, but it is not a giant assault rifle. So that it fell into the pile with all the assault rifles because of the way that it works, or maybe the way that it looks, but whatever. More like politicians used a giant brush to create infringements. And that's one of these, like you're saying, like people that never paid attention to infringements before are at the store saying, what? When they're trying to buy, again, a piece of outdoor equipment, really, more than any kind of weapon. I mean, I guess you technically call it a weapon, but you got to really be reaching.
I bought my Marlin 60 right after 1639 went into effect, and I had to wait 15 days for my assault 22.
So I have a funny story for you all about that. Remember we had that huge petition that was coming up to repeal 1639, that fiasco? I'm not going to go into the details of behind the scenes fiasco. So Curtis, who's one of the main guys behind the Washington Civil Rights Association, and I were doing booth duty to get signatures on the petition to repeal 1639. And we were in front of, I can't remember, it's in Federal Way. It's one of the big shops that would carry like 1022s, and we had people coming in. It was raining and everything, so it was just a miserable day, kind of like right now. And we were approaching everybody who was coming in, and it's like, would you like to sign this? And some guy goes in, yeah, whatever, I'll see you guys when I get out. I'm like, okay, that's fine, have a wonderful day. Not even 7 minutes later, he comes storming out running. Where's a pen? Where's to sign this? And his wife says, I told you so. I told you to pay attention. I can't believe I have to wait such and such time for this and that for a Ruger 1022. This is for my grandkids. I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing because of just the hilarity of the situation. I'm going to tell you, he ended up sending 30 people over to us that day.
Exactly, right? Because he's offended, and he's like, the overreach was palatable as opposed to theoretical, right? Or like, you didn't have to picture it. Now you encountered it. And that's kind of, it's like, you can't incite that. I mean, I suppose you could, but it's, it'd be immoral to try to incite that kind of emotion or reaction of somebody. And that's something that, again, it's sort of like this dealing with court cases after bad law. Like, it's a bad way to have to address it, but at least it's something we can use to salvage, right? It's like a silver lining in the whole thing that some of these people are never going to learn, but once they learn, some of them, hopefully not enough of them, are super vocal about it, right?
Oh yeah, I believe that individual has been very, very vocal going forward on this stuff. And he thought he hadn't even read. I mean, my God, reading 1639 when it was being pushed out was just horrific because it was so massive. And so those who are listening who are not in Washington State, 1639 was technically a voter initiative that was, signatures were gained and put on the ballot.
Well, it never should have made it to the ballot.
It never should have made it on the ballot because it covered more than one item against Washington law, and there was a lot of other stuff that was going with it. But here's a little thing. Every single part of 1639 was every single gun control bill that we had fought in the state legislature and beat that year. Every single one of them.
It was like they took the garbage can of all the stuff that was thrown in the garbage and then just put it right back on the table as a ballot initiative.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was.
I mean, I really think, and this is, people are going to go, oh, whatever, tinfoil, but really these a lot of times are, what's the word, like put toe in the water or canary in the thing. Like, these are tests, right, at a state level to see what strategies work, what kind of marketing works, what's successful to who, and then, I mean, I'm not even theorizing this because what they've accomplished or done to y'all in Washington, they then apply to Oregon. They've done it to Nevada successfully, but then lazily, so it didn't apply, in the long term. But I mean, it's not like this is theory, like, oh, maybe they're trying California stuff on Oregon or in Washington, and then, they're literally, that's what they're doing. They're doing heinous stuff to y'all, and then whenever it works, they attempt it in other states.
Yes.
And now what's happening is they're learning probably from their mistakes. We have to assume they're going to learn from their mistakes. So they're going to start to take your recipes, tweak them a little bit using the marketing. That's all they're doing. This is also a marketing effort. The way I understand it is Bloomberg just took his cash and said, oh, here, the state of Washington, how many marketing firms do you have? Let me just hire all of them, give them all the task of making this law exist, walk away and just keep writing checks. And even if you were pro-gun and you wanted to hire a marketing firm and fight the message, you literally couldn't. They all were hired by the people with money. And that was the strategy, to obscure the message, get signatures by any means necessary. Now it looks official because it's on the ballot. Change the message, hide the message again under safety or kids or something, and then push it through again with a marketing effort. I mean, am I simplifying it too much?
No, actually, you're covering it very, very accurately. And it's the billionaires who are funding this. So we had Paul Allen, the
Oh, yeah.
who passed away during the
Oh, that's
last.
a Microsoft money guy, right?
He was Microsoft money. Paul Allen also owned, and correct me if I'm wrong, Seattle Seahawks.
Yep.
He also owns Venture Capital, which is a real estate and venture capitalist firm. You had Steve Ballmer, who was Microsoft money. And then you had Nick and Linda Hanauer, who are billionaire venture capitalists, who both donated money individually.
Well, that's super interesting. I knew it was Bloomberg, but I don't like that generalization, because that is just the generalization of like all rich people. And in this case, this is new tech money who feel like they need to change the world, and they've got some delusion that gun laws or gun infringements are going to change the world to the positive. So it sounds like we could also have a strategy where people go try to talk to these people individually, get them disinterested in funding these things. I don't know if that's possible or not, but at least it could be a strategy.
There are supposedly venture capitalists, and besides the Koch brothers, that everybody like, or the one who's still alive that likes to demonize. The interesting thing with Hanauer was he is also into real estate and things like that. When the real estate crisis hit, Bloomberg was the mayor of New York at the time. So Bloomberg Financial, as a financial news network, was really, really good, because Bloomberg was hands off. He could not touch it. He couldn't do anything with it. He couldn't set editorial guidelines, nothing. So you had really good reporters there at the time that really focused on a lot of good stuff. Nick Hanauer was actually interviewed, and he made a statement that if the wealthy elitists were not careful, the working class were going to take the plows and turn them into weapons and attack the elitists for what was being done to real estate, to personal wealth and equity, and pretty much destroying the middle class. I'll have to find that, because it was a pretty interesting quote and that's actually what he said. And this is the guy who's funding gun control. He looks down on anybody in the middle and working class. He doesn't think that
and not like an altruistic, like, let's help these poor idiots, or like these idiots. Instead, it's like, oh, well, we're scared of these idiots figuring out something and then coming after us, so let's just keep making it difficult or not possible for them to mobilize or whatever.
Yes. He doesn't think that anybody who is less wealthy has the same human rights that he does. And that's what it comes down to, is, and I think we brought this up the last time I was on, this is a human rights battle. This is a battle on how somebody recognizes the humanity of the other person.
I think that's working, because it's been more and more a focus of more and more groups, like literally like the drive of the group, the motivation of the group, or some adjacent thing to that. But then it's also like in the conversations that are out there. And I think that when we see the antis literally putting out campaigns that are out there in articles, I guess I call that a campaign, to confuse the whole like racist history of gun control, and the whole point that literally the first laws that we didn't even talk about were the laws to prevent slaves from owning firearms, right? That before we had states and stuff, like there's the racist tendencies of the whole control issue, or predate the country. Like they're there, and a long time. Anyway, people don't want to focus on that, and they want to, or I think they've recently intentionally tried to fog that up or even flip it completely. That's a lot of their tendency, is to just flip it over 180 and act like, here's the narrative from the other side. But anyway, the fact that they're doing that and not addressing head on people like, I don't know, Maj, or somebody who's like, focusing on that element of it, or Katie, right, who literally talks about gun control and being racist and that kind of thing. Like, none of them want to head on directly. They want to confuse that and then sidestep it. And
Yeah.
I think that's an indication that they understand that that's a direction they can't hit at all. So now it's like, oh, let's mess with safety. They just don't realize. Well, I think actually there's something else. I don't want to get too many tangents here. Safety is something that we all agree on, but because there's not a definition, it's kind of like organic or natural. Like, it's something that we all appreciate, but none of us can agree on what it is. So it's not like kid safe is the option, right? Or the
Yeah.
today's option. There's still always three options. There's always Eddie Eagle, and then there's NSSF Kid Safe. And I'm just using that as an example. But now
Well,
guys are
NSS,
going after that whole thing because they see a little bit of a fracture, a little bit of a, not 100% on our side, but also they want to sidestep the whole race thing because they're not competent. They know that they don't have the ability to counter KD's messages, right?
right. Project Child Safe is under NSSF. Kids Safe Foundation, which is Derek LeBlanc, that's completely independent of that. He has sponsors from Cabela's and Bass Pro Shops, but he is an independent organization from that. And I don't know if y'all are aware, Derek has actually reached out and taught firearm safety to over 24,000 children at this time. And that number is growing. And he's one of the few people who has been able to teach actual firearm safety on the big island of Hawaii, which is one of the most restrictive states to do anything like that at all. So, yes, there you go, 2014. So the man from Tupperware found it. So, yeah, the pitchforks are coming, and he actually defined what the pitchforks were. So, but yeah, we do have safety. They are trying to use safety right now from the antis, and they're trying to take that over because we've taken over their message several times. Gun Sense,
Oh yeah,
originally
mom's is over. Like, they know that what messaging isn't working anymore, or like they've lost the ownership of that narrative, and I don't think they're comfortable if they don't have the whole area. At least they've never encountered just time when they didn't own the whole battlefield.
right, and that's the reason why we're seeing more from Giffords and from Brady right now. And when you were talking about marketing, you're not wrong on that at all. People have to remember that Shannon Watts used to be high up. I don't remember if it was the chief marketing officer or one or two steps down for Monsanto, the makers of Roundup. She used to work for them. That's something to be aware of. She knows marketing very, very well. And which is why they got up as many of the marketing firms here in Washington when 1639 was going on. Now, my background before I got into IT was graphic design, but in editorial and advertising layout. So I'll use what I know in that, but I don't write copy. I've never been somebody to write copy. This is where Curtis comes in and a few other individuals. I'll say, get me the copy. I'll get the image. Y'all know how in the face images I will use. If you've ever seen my Instagram feed or Twitter feeds, I'll push it out. And that's one of the ways that we can do it. Using the multiple social medias, we've been able to break Shannon Watts' grab from Mom's Demand and from Giffords and from Brady. We've been able to break that by participating in social media. and getting the voices out, working with everything. And instead of infighting between ourselves, which does happen, but when the time comes, we focus on the other side. We focus on those who are trying to strip rights.
I just looked it up so that we have the real deal on Shan Shan. So she started her career in 1993 as public affairs officer for a Missouri governor, and then in 1998 she became vice president of corporate and public affairs at a top marketing or a top public relations company. Then in 3 years later, 2001, she became director of global and public affairs for Monsanto, where she led external initiatives designed to generate positive, proactive media coverage for the company's agriculture biotechnology products. Monsanto is the people that own the DNA of corn and heavy-handed about it. International Corn and well, a lot of the giant company owns food. Then between 2004 and 2006, she worked as a communications director for GE and later became the vice president of corporate communications at a health insurance company. Then in 2012, she became a stay-at-home mom that was just out to, fold laundry and protect kids' lives. She had never donated to charity before then, according to this article, and then she became an accidental activist working for Bloomberg under moms. So she went from all that to like deciding to stay home and making a life change. So either good for her or it's fake as hell.
It's fake as hell. A woman in that position doesn't all of a sudden change. And that's me speaking as a woman. Women do not do that. You don't leave that type of a position where you have the ability to leave the office when you want to leave the office to being a stay-at-home mom. Because if I remember the time that Shannon stepped out of the corporate, Michael Bloomberg was the mayor of New York City, and he was getting his mayors against guns or mayors for gun control, something like that.
Rebranding, from an earlier initiative.
He was trying to get that started because that wasn't too far along after he was pushing heavy on the because Rudy Giuliani is the one who actually started stop and frisk in New York City to help clean up the city. Bloomberg is the one who expanded it to the massive violations that it was and brought it to the level where it really was violating Fourth Amendment and Fifth Amendment rights. And that's also about when I think he was doing the starting against the mayors for gun control or mayors against guns and starting up with that. Now, here's a little bit of information. There's another group in New York City called Gays Against Guns, or GAG. I went to high school with one of those founders. That founder claims to be a very avant-garde bohemian individual who happens to be the niece of one of the former senators of the state of Arizona. She has known Bloomberg personally, met him during social things from family and things like that, because she's part of the DeConcini family. The DeConcini family, and the reason why that's kind of important to know, is DeConcini and the senator who I can't stand, who I don't care is dead anymore, John McCain, were part of the Keating Five, which was the penny stock scandal that happened during one of the other financial scandals and issues that happened. I believe that was in the 90s when that happened. So Gays Against Guns is politically connected and socially connected to Michael Bloomberg. And when you have individuals who look at trying to see where funding has happened. And I understand, G. Webb's, what you're saying before about it's not just Bloomberg, it's other individuals. See who's funding the trace. Anybody who's been online, they try to push out articles and everything else. They say they're independent. When you see the Joyce Foundation, I believe the Gates Foundation is listed also, and a bunch of these other groups, you see who's actually the who's who of financial support on gun control with that.
You know, one of my things too has been like the national level organizations for the most part are run by people who like want to run like a PAC, you know, somebody who promotes an idea or a good politician or something, or just like commentary on the news or something, or a bunch of lawyers, and lawyers like to litigate, right? So they wait for a court case and then do their thing. And that's one of those things like the hammer and nail thing. So I think it's cool to think about, I don't know who would be the person, but you know, whoever it is, maybe somebody like a Canoe Reeves or whoever, like got a taste of the firearms community, is, you know, a big enough entity, but then, you know, either in a social setting or in a public setting, but you know, able to go head to head with the public figures, challenge the money, because that is something that's interesting. Like we hear often from people who are getting into the awareness of activism and our infringements and stuff, the number of our infringements, they'll say, "Oh, we need a Bloomberg," and I've always said, "No, we don't." But I like the idea of not just allowing the narrative, allowing these folks who have the scratch, the money to fund all this to just be unchallenged. So that, like the idea, I never heard it brought up before, of like sending people in who have the ability, the resources, or the connections, you know, who can get into those rooms and bug the people at the top level. Because I mean, well, how annoying would it be? Like, what an egg in the face if it's like some of these people are just totally undedicated and just heard a TED talk and decided to throw $1 million, and that's like us throwing $20, and it's like, hey guy or gal, quit throwing that $20, and they go, oh yeah, no problem, and now boom, it's unfunded, and it's something is like head smack, like all we had to do is turn off the faucet, like instead of worrying about mopping everything up or the best strategy for staying wet, you know, dry while it's wet. You know, we're reacting when instead we could be looking at the source of this whole thing.
Yeah.
I'm not saying we can just easily turn it off, but at least put some pressure there, at least shine some lights on things that we're just assuming are the playing field when they're not the playing field. They're just elements that create the playing field we're dealing with this today.
We are getting better at this. And I think we're getting close to actually turning that tide compared to where we were 5 years ago. Now,
anytime the future or the past, yeah, we're definitely getting there.
We're definitely getting there. And it's taking a unified, and it's really, this is one of the concerns that I'm kind of wondering why, because of how organized we're here in Washington, the fact that we've been able to get over 15,000 people to sign up against the assault, not the assault weapons, but the magazine capacity, levels that have never been seen before in organizing. Part of that is how we were using social media and some of the other stuff, and that includes Discord. Well, all of a sudden, Discord has the same change of terms of service that Twitter had, meaning that you can be banned based on what you've done outside of their program. And knowing how a lot of political organizations are when it comes to fundraising and things like that, I have to wonder if there's been some communication between 1 to 2 degrees of separation of 1 or 2 Washington legislators or somebody who's involved in the gun control community and the individuals who are running Discord.
It would be super cool to get like a whiteboard or something, right? And then start putting one of those, like, there's always that meme of that guy from It's Always Sunny in Pennsylvania, some episode, he's like leaning against the one wall and there's always like pieces of yarn between all these things on a corkboard or a bulletin board. and it's one of those like trying to explain something, one of those memes. But it'd
Mm-hmm.
be cool to get that. Or maybe the cooler thing is one of them pieces of glass that's in the middle of a room, like in like a cool fancy CSI type of show. So you get
Mm-hmm.
that piece of glass and you write on it with marker or whatever. But
Yep.
yeah, start to associate. Here's the like what Foss is doing with this show, like using that article's bullet points. Here's the 34, here's the 68, here's the 86, here's the things that are infringements at the major levels. Who was in charge of this, or who caused this? Like, what was the instigation of this? And then once you start doing that, you of course get to today and all the campaigns and infringements, the major elements of like they're using against us, and yeah, start to put those pieces of yarn to who's paying for all this, because it's not like one person, I don't think, is sitting there twisting their mustache, but there's certainly a lot of stuff going against us that is just a bunch of stuff. And once we comb it all out, figure it all out, strategies become evident. And I forget who said it, but somebody said at a gun rights policy conference, you don't micromanage volunteers and tell them each exactly what to do. You just say, hey, we need to get to the top of that hill. Let's meet you there. And then, if we got the information out there, here's all the people that are messing with us,
Mm-hmm.
figure out how to stop this. Go, like, go figure it out. Like, there's got to be a million ways to stop this. Let's try 500,000 of them, or let's try 200,000 of them, right? Let's
Mm-hmm.
try something.
One of the things, so DM, I just put in your Discord server Instagram link, and because I know you wanted to keep this topic on gun laws, and this is actually from somebody I know who is in Minnesota. And this is like what you were saying, G-Webs, on this. This is how we can fight some of the stuff. I was not aware that they are trying to do some of the same stuff that was originally started here in Washington and California. They're trying to do in Minnesota.
Oh, they're moving it to Minnesota. Now, is it the same people, like they're doing it, or it's like it's being used again? The strategy is being used again. But
The
is it
strategy is being used again. And this is a state legislator who is submitting several bills. And those bills run from police to issue or not issue permits to carry, mental and physical health tests for a permit to carry, mandatory reporting of all lost or stolen firearms, registration of all 50 caliber firearms, firearms banned in all government buildings, felony charges. So that's actually worse than what we've got here in Washington. What we're trying to do with the I can't remember which one it is. It's the two remaining House bills. And then permits to own any firearm in Minnesota, and liability insurance required for all firearm owners. That's being submitted to their legislation right now. And
normally I'm against things like this, but this sounds like a bunch of rational stuff that would give us public safety. So I think I'm going to be okay with it. This is okay.
yeah, so that particular individual is John Marty, and he's the one who is a senator there who is trying to submit many of the same things that we have here in Washington that are being fought, that California already has.
I love it. Like, wrap it all together and sell it as like a package. Like, hey, this is the best of all worlds. This is like a top 40 hits of the West Coast.
Mm-hmm.
Vote for this.
So that's currently what Minnesota is fighting, as their stuff is getting through. So as I get more information, I'll be passing that on also and putting that out so that people have information on how to fight it. One thing that we've been able to do with examples from Virginia and actually for the California rifle, the organizations there, the actual true grassroots ones, is knowing how to fight specifically for each state. And that's key, because each state legislature works differently than the other one.
I'm down for setting up something like that. I don't want to repeat anything, but I'm happy to like repost stuff that might already exist or help create something if nothing exists. But are you describing something that should happen, or that you're describing something that an effort's already been done?
We've done it here in Washington, and what it is the
But
Washington
for Washington, not like for the whole country yet.
Right. And I actually do believe it should be for each state. So in Washington, we've actually created the Washington Civil Rights Association, and this was a lot of the leaderships of the different 2A groups here. Not everybody agrees with everybody. There's a lot of hurt feelings and egos that go on. That is what it is. But the message is working. With how we get the stuff pushed out, with how to utilize not just one format of social media, but for everybody to get the message out and talking to people. That's really where we've been able to change a lot of the stuff here. And it's also where we've been able to call out the legislators who are supporting these bills and who, during the digital town halls, try to push some of the stuff through and find out that it's becoming more difficult than they thought because there's more people fighting against them on this. And they get called out that their town halls are only being approved scripts to talk to certain people. So addressing the fact that a specific legislator is supporting gun control is not being allowed. They're not allowing individuals who are not happy with their legislator to speak out. And I think part of the other thing is doing some stuff outside the politicians, getting involved in the community, helping to clean some of the communities up. I'm getting ready to work with a small business here in Tacoma, Washington, to clean up one of the most violent areas of the state, which is East Tacoma. We're going to go in and we're going to be clean. We're not waiting for the politicians anymore. And that's the other thing, is with some of the stuff with the laws, we fight the laws, and then we prove the politicians to be unvaluable. I'm not going to say worthless because they're still a human being, but that they're not needed to be fixing. And it'll be time to start repealing all these laws. And repealing by submitting bills into the legislature to overturn 1639. Yes, it's a voter initiative, but that doesn't mean that the legislature can't overturn it.
Well, no, then it's because of the way it's created is fragile. It just has to have an initiative behind it to push and, or awareness to get it, to people to be offended by it and have it removed. It's like a push-pull type of thing. But that all that takes is, doing it. Now, I agree with the concept. I don't know if you know, I forgot the guy's name. There's a guy in Colorado that came around right before the 2019 rally, and he was kind of making the scene. Because remember how the NRA was kind of falling apart? And I don't know, people paying attention to it or not. The NRA didn't just fall over. It was kind of falling. And then a bunch of people were jumping ship that were NRA people. And I don't know if it was like a saving face or if they truly are like apologetic for their role in like the fall of it, or like the whatever, the apathy that allowed the fall of it, or whatever the negatives things you want to look at from that. But anyway, it was that kind of a scenario. This guy comes around and he's like independently wealthy or something, and he's all like, hey, we're going to make, or one of my projects is to make effectively what you said, some sort of a workshop, workbook, resources for activists, people that want to become a 2A activist and have questions or need resources. Here's this thing. And so I was like, okay, I won't do it because there's somebody with ultimate resources and an intent to do this, to fill that. I'm going to wait. And now it's been 3 years and I'm still waiting. It's something that's necessary. So what you're talking about, having a resource, where you thumb through it and each state, has the appropriate things for the state, that are, strategies or, contact information so that everybody who comes to it can say, okay, I want to do stuff. Here's some resources to be able to do that. But at the same time, archive strategies that work, strategies that didn't, but also just the campaigns. Like, this is what they used against us. This is what they used against us. Because if nothing else, when somebody's talking in Minnesota right now, they should be able, if they're able to, if they had the insight and awareness, they could say, why are you bringing to us what's caused this consequence in Washington State? You know, this happened to Washington State in this year, and since then, here's the cost. Washington State's ignoring, you know, the social cost, the actual physical cost, the overreach of government cost, right? So it can, the stuff that is infringements and the tyranny you're living under, you know, can be used as an example in other states to prevent it. But that becomes precedent. And now Washington, your fight can be, look, they tried to do the same thing in Washington, in Minnesota, and it stopped dead in its tracks as soon as they figured out how the consequences here were negative. So let's, for love of all that's good, get rid of the problem here so that we quit being a laughing stock of the rest of the country. And that can be an impetus or like an, you know, anyway. So I could see it being like a way that we can become stronger. And I seriously believe that once we have something like that, that isn't like a Bloomberg funded, you know, here's some rich guy who has a motivation, or some rich lady decides on a whim to be against guns or for guns. And, you know, so for a minute we have a resource. And trust me, I've lived through lots of resources that existed for a while online and then disappeared, you know, constitutional care, or concealed carry type of resources, and school carry and that kind of thing. So anyway, have something that isn't funded by one individual or entity, but that is used by a whole bunch of people to defend against tyranny. What happens? I think most of those political analysts, when Bloomberg comes along and says, here, I want to pay you to do this, they're going to literally get paid to look around and go, dude, that's a no-win scenario. Do you really want us to grind all your money into the dirt trying to change people's mind on something that has been established? Or I could go after pools. You know, swimming pools don't have fences around them. Nobody's going to defend against that. Stairways that don't have railings. Nobody's going to defend against that. You can use the same emotional appeals and make money, which is all he's trying to do, by complaining against, you know, the weather didn't work here, so why don't we complain against pools? Like, all these rich people have pools. All these people that don't even use their pools, you know, what up? You know, they can figure out something else to go after. And I'm not saying that's okay. I'm just saying I think that that's one of the benefits of getting organized and getting better at defending against this garbage, because one, we can use the strategy. Well, I'm going to repeat myself, but we can use the strategies, remember the battles, and then they're going to see that by being uniform, or by being organized, we're not the same old mechanism, the same old easy target that they used to have, and they're going to look elsewhere to make their money or spend their money. You know, be altruistic somewhere where they can make a difference. Because if they come along and just have perfect intentions, I want to stop suffering and save lives. Well, if we can show them that the least effective thing they can do is go after our property, and the most effective thing they can do to actually save lives would be to remove the barriers of mental health and stigmas, and help veterans and give VA some support, right, and reduce suicides. They literally save lives. Then maybe they'd say, hey, thanks for that. Let me support you, because these people are obviously just going after the tug of war between your property and their emotions and blah, blah, blah. They're exploiting people while you're literally trying to save lives. Yeah. And the best part of that is, once we save lives with that strategy, we look at it and go, and unlike Child Safe, which I'll fight against Child Safe any day, Derek is doing way better with Kid Safe. Sorry, I'm inflating those before. But instead of scolding people, we'll then be able to champion. Look at what we did. We saw a problem and we solved it by doing X, Y, Z. And, you know, screw all you people for ignoring the actual problem just to conflate all that and, you know, complain about our property is with that agenda, when, you know, this was the problem and together we solved it. And that's where gun ownership can lead the way on lots of things, because then people can say, oh, look at the way a whole bunch of disassociated people figured out that a fundamental thing joined them, and they saved, or they fixed, right? I'll shut up.
No, actually, you brought in a lot of good things, and you brought in something historically, 2 points that we need to address historically, and looking back. The same individuals, this is the same language with a small change that was used for prohibition. That's being used to go up against guns. Think of the children. Public health. Think of the children. It's more dangerous for you to have alcohol in the home, because when the husband comes home or the father comes home, he's drinking, and then there's an argument and he ends up beating his children, or spends all his money on alcohol instead of taking care of his family. That was the same. This is, except for the minor changes, it is the same language and the same message that was used for prohibition. You have to look how did we fight prohibition? Was the increase of crime because it was ignored? It actually created organized crime, because it was nowhere near the way it was then, before prohibition started. And when you look at that, and then when you realize in the 50s and 60s, and then into the early 70s, when you see how many people died by firearm accidents, right now it's less than 500 a year. We've had that number down that low for a very, very long time. But 30, 40 years ago, it was probably, if I remember correctly, in 5 digits. We in the 2A community changed that. We're the ones who changed that by the 4 rules of firearm safety. That's when that came out, when Colonel Cooper, retired Colonel Jeff Cooper, came out and came up with that, because that's when people were dying from firearm accidents.
And that was when we went from semi-auto, or I mean single action revolvers to semi-auto. I mean, there's technology changes, and once people have different guns, they can
We
have
still had
different
semi-autos.
No, I know, but I'm just saying,
1911s.
I'm just throwing that element in there. That's awesome that you brought up Cooper and the 4 rules, because that definitely, before that, people were like, maybe look down the barrel or keep your finger off. I don't think they even said keep your finger off trigger. They just said stuff like don't pull the trigger, but they never said don't put your finger on the trigger. It was Colonel Cooper who was thinking about it, started to think about how to get the information across. I don't want to get into all that, but no, I think that's an awesome point. I'm just saying that it's not like gun accidents just happen. It's just that all of a sudden when there's a 1022 and a kid, there's just different accidents that can happen. So than before with a lever action gun, there's just like 100 and something years of our existence, we had muskets, and just certain accidents were never going to happen. So you can't go like, well, in the olden days, nobody had gun accidents. Well, of course, you didn't often load a musket and then shoot it at yourself. But when you have a semi-auto 22 pistol, it's really possible to shoot your toe and now to be a gun accident. And like you say, as soon as we figured that out as a community industry, whatever we want to call it, we literally applied common sense to ourselves, self-regulation, awareness, education, and boom, we dropped that number to nothing. And that's my problem with Child Safe. I don't want to get too much of a tangent, but Child Safe says, remember, gun owners, remember, where in real life we already knew and we solved the problem, where Child Safe should be saying gun owners solved the problem of gun safety. But I think they just don't want to boast or something. But we literally, and same thing with Orange, Hunter Safety Orange. That was an NRA initiative to stop people from an idea of like hunters being yahoos. Hunters are yahoos. I'm not going to suggest that hunters ain't yahoos. For a long time, it was like tailgating or something. Let's grab a bunch of beers and go duck hunting, or let's grab a bunch of beers and go deer hunting. Because for the most part, in some places where you got cornfields, you literally just stand there for 40 minutes and wait for the pest deers, the vermin, the things that are eating your corn, to come out and get shot. So you could just sit there being drunk. That's different than, anyway. So there was things that by just being awareness and education, again, hey guys, it's looking bad and you're also killing each other. Okay, let's wear orange and quit doing that. Boom, accidents way down. Sorry, I didn't mean to hijack, but I think those
Colonel Cooper also designed the 10 millimeter. So
good point.
One thing I wanted to bring up, Sharon, I watched some of the clips that the Washington Civil Rights put up of the testimonies for and against the mag limits. One of the ladies who was pro mag limit said that I swear she said mass shootings, but I can't remember if it was mass shootings or just gun deaths were the leading cause of children deaths, which is ridiculous.
It's a lie.
Was that the Seattle City Councilwoman?
I think it was.
I think it was Lisa Burhard, something like that. She's out over in West Seattle as her district. She actually ran for mayor. Thank God she lost. That actually is a lie. Uh, and all somebody needs to do, and this is verifiable for anybody, all they need to do is go to the, and this is from the CDC, it takes a while to go through, is the Department of Vital Statistics. And you can see, and they put out a chart every year of what everybody dies from, whether it's suicide, how they commit suicide, whether it's an accident, what type of illness, is it a medical mistake, is it a vehicle accident? If it's a vehicle accident, is it a car, or is it a passenger vehicle, is it a motorcycle, or is it a truck? They have all that information. That comes from the death certificates. So if there's going to be a thing with the firearms for being the leading cause, it'll be there. And since I'm not on my desktop and I'm on my laptop, I don't have that information readily available. Quickly, let me see if I have it in my phone. Hold on. Because there are charts and graphs that show what the leading cause is. Let me see if I have this one. For 2014,
This is from
depending-
CDC, you're saying?
pardon?
Sorry, this is from CDC?
Yes, it's under the CDC and it's the Department of Vital Statistics.
Because back in the day, that used to be much easier to find, and now they definitely have it like 3 or 4 links deep. You have to kind of dig around to get just the straight numbers.
Yeah, so DJ Play Nice is correct. It's part of the mortality and morbidity report. This comes out annually, and it's 100 and some odd page report. So in 2014, the leading cause of violence-related injury or deaths for ages 1 to 4, it was unintentional drowning. Ages 5 through 24, because unfortunately 18, 19, 20, 18 through 24 are actually put into a group from 15 to 24. Unintentional motor vehicle accidents. That's the number one cause from ages 5 through 24, not firearms. And the next one is where you start seeing homicide firearms is ages 15 through 24. Now, the distinction when they say homicide firearms, it is something that's very, very, very clear, because that's including criminal homicide. That's including police-related shootings. That's including gang and drug-related shootings for that. So that's a very, very specific category. And it's also including 18 through 24. It's
That's
not
what,
just all children.
with a lot of the statistics that are brought up, anti-gun and things similar, you have to really look at what are the parameters that they're using.
Yes.
Because the calling a 24-year-old a child, to me, at my age, yeah, I will kind of consider someone that age, a child. But, they can legally drive, drink, smoke, buy weed in some states, vote. They are not a child. They're so that that's an expanded definition of what a child is, which most people wouldn't consider that a child either. So when you see these stats, you really have to kind of look into what are they defining as what. The number, they'll trying not to rant. Just overall, when you gun deaths and they call it, gun violence is has, what's the term that they use now? I can't think of it. I can't think like them.
Rampant?
It's, yeah,
An epidemic?
Oh, epidemic.
epidemic. They
Yeah.
call it an epidemic.
Mhm.
No, when you look at the numbers of what are killing people, doctors kill the most people every
Yes.
year in the U.S.
Oh,
You're
and it's like in the hundreds of thousands, if I'm not crazy. It's like the number one
Yes.
compared
Yeah.
to like 10,000, and that's 2/3 are suicides. So,
malpractice is the number one killer of people in the U.S.
Yes.
but that's because there's so many of us, and all it is we're getting old and dying or getting sick and having emergencies that go bad. But you know what I mean? It's not. It's like that's just people living on a planet and having interesting lives. But it's not like doctors twisting their mustache and knocking us off, by killing us in surgery, right? That's
Oh,
just the
some of it
sheer
is.
number of us. But I'm
Oh,
just
some
saying, like, for the
some of it
majority,
is.
well, okay. But I'm just saying, it's when you look at that number, it's huge. But it's just because we have so many people. So I'm just trying to say that again, people don't look at that number and go, "Wow, that's an indication of 300 million people."
Mm-hmm.
So that 10,000 is so nothing. It's like such a little speck of sand in a beach.
Yeah.
But it's focused on because it's horrible. Like every life matters, obviously. So when it's an unnecessary death, and I'm not trying to overlook any kind of doctor thing. I'm just saying like that huge number that's so much bigger than gun things is because we live in a giant country full of a lot of people, and
Mm-hmm.
we just aren't good at conceptualizing in our heads how giant these numbers are, how many of us there are.
Yeah, I just bring it up, just to point out that when you hear these claims, you need to understand how they're using it and what it entails. So if you want to counteract what they're saying, you can show this is not true, this is misleading, or this is a flat out lie. And for those who are watching, I just kind of gave up on the on the Time article because what we've been discussing was, I thought, much more productive than what we were doing before. So
Sorry, I have a habit of doing that.
no, it's good. That's why I didn't stop anybody, because it's constructive.
So I just sent over to your Discord server 3 of the graphs that really show the breakdown of this. And this is where hopefully I can find some people who can crunch numbers better than me and finding out some information and to really break down where all the firearm fatalities are happening or where all the stuff is happening. And as comparison to building out the charts and the graphs for how people are dying and things like that. So, and so when they talk about, that's one of the big ones, and that actually takes some time. So the year that 2017 for the firearm fatalities, if I remember correctly, almost 70% of firearm fatalities were suicide that year. Excuse me, the antis don't really go into that. Or they say, well, you shouldn't have the guns, and that's the reason why we had the red flag laws. Well, red flag laws don't get somebody into medical treatment. They don't get somebody into mental health treatment. And that's the reason why the red flag laws are so horrific. We already have laws in the books to deal with somebody who's going through a mental health crisis.
They can also add a stigma so people won't seek help.
Correct.
Instead of removing a barrier, they become a barrier.
Yes. And that is one of the good reasons why Walk the Talk America is so valuable. And that is Jake Wilkerson. Sorry, Jake, I butchered your name. And Michael Sedini. And this is an organization who has the ability to bring mental health professionals together with the 2A community and educate them, the mental health professionals, that gun owners aren't evil. They aren't these bad people. They aren't, for wanting to own a firearm does not make them clinically psychotic. And he's been doing education and getting mental health professionals on board, small practices at a time, that gun owners can go to and trust that their Second Amendment rights are not going to be violated with a red flag law from a medical professional. And this I will say to anybody who's listening: if you feel like you are under stress or just going through what you think is like, don't know what to do, go to WTTA.org, Whiskey Tango Tango Alpha.org. They have a self-assessment on their website that will tell you whether or not are you going through something that's actually normal stresses. It just seems like it's a little bit more, or hey, you really do need to talk to somebody, and let's see about getting you some resources, connecting you to the resources that you need to talk to somebody so that you don't end up being the statistic. And that's what's key. Here in Washington, we have forefront suicide prevention at the same time. So, and this is the one place where I will actually, yes, that's it, walkthetalkamerica.org. I will actually work with the other side on suicide prevention because we need to save these lives. Now, I also realize you're not going to be able to save everybody. Not everybody wants to be saved. And somebody who is really despondent will find another method to commit suicide. And somebody who has had a family member go through that, know there's also others to talk to for this. And you can do everything you can to help that person, and they will still go through with it. It's not to say that what you did in surviving what that action is bad. So that is also something to be aware of. And that's where I differ from some of the 2A purists. Suicide prevention crosses over everything.
I don't know if they get to be called to a purist. That would be more like somebody who's in some kind of doctrine or not keeping up, because while there isn't a line to pull, the line does change, that we evolve. And if you're gonna, for example, suggest that the best way to describe to somebody is using horse and carriage as an analogy, it might be correct, it might work, it might be technically true or accurate, but if no one can relate to the horse and buggy anymore, it's going to fall flat. So you can be as right as you want, and you can be as 100% it worked in the past, and there's all these examples of it being a good theory. However, if the people you're selling it to or giving it to or offering it to ain't picking it up and doing anything with it, then you're not a purist anymore. You're just a traditionalist or something, but you're either intentionally or unintentionally farting around with the, like yelling at the wall in a museum. Like what you've accomplished is good, and if you want to, claim participation in it, awesome. But you don't get to. Its success isn't a place like a plateau where we all stop. It's on a finish line. So whatever you accomplished, you either adapt and take your thing and contribute to the new, or realize the new is a different message. But yeah, the people that are not willing to address suicide issues as part of the gun Second Amendment fight are not paying attention to what's working and what's actually putting the fight in the place where it needs to be, as opposed to playing the old paradigm back and forth tetherball game or ping pong game with the old antis. The old antis had this little game going where everybody made money yelling and screaming about cross paths, our property, our feelings, our property. If someone's intentionally staying back there, then they're working against us at this point. If
Yeah.
they're unintentionally sticking with it because it's what worked, they need to be aware that it's not working anymore and there's other options. And if they're not willing to jump on board, that's fine. You don't have an obligation, and thank you for your time in the fight. But if you
Mhm.
stand in the way and say, no, you're wrong, this old fashioned way is the only way to do it, now you're either old man in the way, move, or you're intentionally screwing with us, get paid by Bloomberg if you're going to get in our way,
Yeah.
because you might as well, because he's giving everybody money. And if you don't realize that, if you don't accept that, wake up, because that's what you're doing. You're getting in the way of people who are kicking the shit out of it and winning and literally have results. Are bringing the new gun owners aren't because they decided to go against Monsanto lady. They did
Mhm.
it because the welcome mat was open and they knew they were able, and there was people waiting for them and facilitated it. And that's
Yeah.
the proof that the new is working. Now, it's not the only thing, and I'm not saying it's perfect, but anyway, I just want to say those people ain't purists. They don't get to say we're right and you people are different. No, the people that are doing it, and the old people are either intentionally or unintentionally getting in the way.
Yeah. And I mean, one of the things that happens with that, when you see JP Sears, somebody who has a large audience, go from being supporting gun control to like, hey, I realized I made a mistake and was public about it. That's somebody in the entertainment industry. You get more and more individuals from that. There's also been individuals, you've had individuals in the music industry come out and say, I'm afraid with everything that's going on. And uh, you have to go. I realized I wanted to get a gun and what to do. Yeah, I'm going to reach out to that person. I'm going to keep that line of communication over. And I don't see this as being compromising or compromising my position on the Second Amendment. So I'm willing to work with people because when I'm at Pride in Seattle, I'm talking to people who voted for 1639. I'm talking to people who voted for 594 and who are more in line to be supporters to Mom's Demand or Giffords or something like that. I'm willing to hold a conversation with them. And the fact that, hey, these are the facts, you have to have all that information out there. And being able to willing to hold that conversation. And that's how you change minds. Not really changing their mind. You give them the information to say like, "Oh, wait, this is what I'm trying this is better than that. I didn't realize that this is what the consequences were." Um One story I'll talk about for Seattle Pride. And so for those who are listening who are not in Washington state, Seattle Pride's one of the bigger pride events that happens in this country, with a gate total of over 200,000 people going into the city at one time. And that's a city of just over 700,000 people. And you have an influx of 200,000 people, both residents and coming in from around the area to attend an event. We had some that say like, well, Snopes said, one young teenage girl said, well, Snopes says this. And I'm like, you do realize that Snopes is going through a divorce because he was having an affair because of all this other stuff. And I'm like, you're more than welcome to keep using Snopes, but realize why it was founded and who the individuals are who are behind it. And I'm like, you're welcome to search it. Come back, prove me wrong. She went around to the other side of our booth and was looking through her phone, and you could see the expression on her face when she lost the battle. And I said, find me the evidence to prove me wrong. I'll gladly hear it. I'll welcome your discussion. She couldn't find anything to prove me wrong. She realized, and her eyes were opened, that what she had been told over and over again was a lie. Then that young woman's going to make a decision. Is she going to look further, or is she going to double down? It's a 50-50 chance. It's a risk when you talk to somebody on the other side that way. But when they make that choice to discover more of the information, go to the actual facts that aren't done on the the Gun Violence Alliance, which was a Reddit troll originally, for the statistics and things like that they use, or from the Gun Responsibility Alliance. It's the whole thing of you have that person becomes more empowered. Oh, the Porcupine Party, they're purple. That's what the Libertarian Party is. I think they take the porcupine sometimes. So they take the color purple, from what I recall. So, but that's the reason why you don't argue with somebody on some of the stuff. Point them in the direction. They're not going to argue with the Department of Vital Statistics. They're not going to argue with the Uniform Crime Report, because how the metrics are is very clear. And when you can show them that you have researchers who have intentionally changed the definition of what a mass shooting is to validate their study, that's significant.
And sometimes that's just like because they want to keep their funding and they could care less about the data and the lives and the consequences, right? So sometimes I think that's going along with what you're saying, like offensive to people, right? Like, oh my gosh, you're willing to have all these consequences just to keep your stupid research funding or what?
It's huge. So the Matt Driscoll from the News Tribune here in Tacoma, Washington, wrote an article, I think it was on the 15th or something of February this month. And his article was, it's time to stop the Rambo, to paraphrase it, the Rambo cosplay, and ban the high capacity magazines. He referenced a survey. He claims it was a study. It's a survey. And when you look into the survey, you can have it stating with audiobooks. I fall asleep with audiobooks, FYI. You have the survey. The survey is not a study. It's not actually going into things. They're just taking a look at multiple reports. And they'll say, what are this is on PubMed, this is on any scientific journal. They have a thing where the authors are from, what schools or groups they're with, and what type of any disclosure information that needs to come out. Disclosure information is, have they received any grant funding? Have they received any other fiscal or financial support for the study that they're doing? Take a look at that. If you see anything from Harvard Medical School of Public Health, or Harvard School of Public Health, if you see anything from the Joyce Foundation, Harvard School of Public Health is funded large chunks by Michael Bloomberg of Everytown for Safety. Joyce Foundation is another group, and you'll see members of the Joyce Foundation who are on other boards, on other charities, and on other companies. That is how all of this communication, G-Webs, that you were talking about, of how do these people know each other? Socially. These boards have social meetings on the nonprofits, and they're also for fundraising for different facilities and things like that. So going through that particular study that Michael Driscoll put on there, it was coming out of a specific University of California, out of San Francisco, where I try to remember the name of it, because I ended up writing up a rebuttal to him, thing that's going to be published later today, on on this. Let me see if I can find it. It was a specific article. Let me pull that up on how I wrote it. So I do apologize for not having this up. When you take a look at what it was done from, that particular group, that school, receives funding from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So yes, that university, that specific subset of the college, receives a large chunk of funding from that. And because of that, they're not going to anger a major supporter. They're going to toe the line, and they are not going to produce something that is against one of their funders. That is something that people who want to see where this whole thing on follow the money, you have to deep dive in following the money, because it does go that deep, or go 4 or 5 layers of who's what. And some of the other organizations for the University of California at San Francisco, where this survey came out of, that's a massive way to see some of the other public health organizations. Oh, the Gates is founding them. So is the Joyce Foundation. So is the Ford Foundation. So is the Levi Strauss Foundation. Anyone who is aware, Levi Strauss, CEO, is very, very, very anti-gun. He will pay his employees their wages. They don't have to take personal time off to demonstrate or volunteer, make phone calls for gun control bills or gun control policies. That's what you have. That's what the whole thing of following the money is. And it's been a very interesting deep dive on that. So, no, I am not going to read Old Yeller. Sorry, not going to happen.
I think that that's, again, one of the things that I've been waiting for. It's on my short list of projects to map out and to create I don't know what to call it. DJ said flow chart earlier, but it's more than a flow chart, I think, because flow chart implies that there's like some solution or some path, when I think it's more like a battle plan or just like a battlefield layout or something. But we've got these antis, and they've got sources of funding, and they've got motivations, and knowing that as a group, like on our side, just understanding who our adversaries are and why and how, then again, I'm going to keep reverting back, because the good work that's being done right now is being done, and it's not being done by people who are like, hey, look what I did. Look what I did. Look at me. Watch what I'm about to do. Right. It's just being done. And the results of that are going to shift the Overton window, or are shifting the Overton window. And I'm not going to repeat myself, but we're seeing indications that. I'm not just saying that or theoretically, like it's literally happening. And one way to double down on that or get more bang for our buck is to apply pressure with that where it's necessary. And the funding, like you're talking about the Gates, for example, funding a big chunk, and because of that, funding a big chunk publicly of anti-gun, then people who are working for them know to make them happy, do anti-gun stuff, right? So that has ripples and consequences. So if we're able to, by changing the Overton window and making people aware of that, not like, hey, we changed it, whew, good, let's just shut up about it and hope they don't push it back the other way, but instead push it, make a big thing. Like, I can't believe they even pushed it. Look how dare they push it over. We're taking it back, and we're not just, we're going to be, vocal about it, let's say. Then we can apply, the people who can and see the ability to can apply pressure to those folks at those parties or in social situations. And even if they don't intentionally do it, when the Overton window changes, there's less casual infringement. There's less casual tyranny, right? Like, it's not cool to be tyrannist anymore. So let's not fund tyranny. So now we remove funding. Now this whole effort is from Monsanto lady is gone. Like her whole like evil strategy is because she's getting paid to do it. She likes living in a fancy house. Well,
Yeah.
she likes living in a fancy house. Let her. Who cares? She's not our enemy. Our enemy is people that want to get rid of us. She's just a marketing. Like
Yeah.
once you get her off the payroll, she leaves us alone, and we could probably pay her. She's wishy washy, right? Like
No, she's not.
Oh
No,
no. Okay.
do not underestimate her.
Then I don't want to go
She,
that way. I don't want to go that far. But basically, we could have her go after, like you said, drowning, which is a bigger problem, and she could go after it without adversaries like us. And
Mhm.
I mean, not that that's a good thing. I shouldn't say that like that, but she could definitely leave us alone. There's strategies where you could apply pressure, and that's all I was getting at by having some kind of a lay of the land. People who are like, you know what, I never thought I could fight or I could participate or help, but you
Mhm.
know what? I bet you I could talk to this person who knows this guy, and all of a sudden, somebody who didn't even realize they had the ability got rid of funding, and now this whole initiative is just gone. Now those people who have been infringed don't have the infringement. They've got the recent memory of being infringed. They go jump on New Jersey and help them, or they go jump
Yes.
into California and help. Like, we're not talking like a finish line. We're just talking free up resources to go be used other places. And
Mhm.
while the iron's hot, we start striking.
And this is something that I've actually brought up to a couple of people, and I'm sure Faust and Baron have seen conversations where I've talked about this. One of the things that we do, we're making the cost of implementing gun control to be fiscally and monetarily extremely expensive in the uh, in Washington State. They're having to put money into us at a higher level than what they've anticipated and what they were expecting. They were expecting us to roll over 3 or 4 years ago, and it's not happened. So they're having to spend more money. So that's more money that's being pulled away from other states that they're trying that maybe are more purple, or that they're trying to convert over, like say Arizona, um, or like some of the stuff that's going on in Virginia, trying to push the fight in there. So there are limitations to their money. There's limitations with how they're doing their fundraising. They can only get so much. Even the elites can only do so much on this, because they can only pay people to a certain point that believe in their cause. And when you get somebody pulled away from somebody who's actually walked the beat and everything else on gun control, you pull that person away with education, with being a friend, with being somebody who's open for a discussion. That individual becomes even stronger than anything that we can do sometimes, because they realize the mistakes that were made and can go out and reach to that. But don't mistake and presume Shan Shan to be someone who will step away quietly. I consider her to be the level of Jim Jones from Jonestown. She firmly believes in what she does. She firmly believes that she has more rights than somebody else, that she's allowed to have armed protection, but not somebody else. So that's a huge thing to realize with some of these gun control people. They do believe that they are better, that they are more valuable, and should be having more than anybody else. And it's not just more money, it's not just more this, it's everything. And that's something that goes with the whole this. The gun lobby isn't spending any money in Washington State. They haven't spent hardly anything. I can't
Okay.
wait for this legislative session to be over and some information to come out. Um, but the gun lobby has spent very, very little in Washington State in the last 5 years. That I can say definitively 100%.
They've kind of just done enough so they can get their name out there.
Yes, barely. Barely. And it's the thing that gets me frustrated with Isla and with the NRA is that they start, how to talk with the legislative actions and things like that. Oh, the SAF has spent a lot of money. That's the one difference. SAF is local here in Bellevue, Washington, and they are the principal law firm and agency that has 3 lawsuits, one of which is with Dan Mitchell from Sporting Systems against 1639. So SAF has done, they're massive. And the SAF, through the Citizens Committee to Keep and Bear Arms, they've done a lot of legislative. One of the individuals who used to work for them would come down. They have a new person who is learning the ropes with that. So they had staff turnover there. So they're not as active this year, but in previous years, they have been very, very active and on the ground. But they have somebody who is getting up to speed with everything going on. So SAF is very, very active. So they're the exception. And I don't actually consider them to be gun lobby because they're local to us, which is probably wrong because they are. And Alan Gottlieb has been doing some of the activity and some of the activism longer than Isla has. So that's also something to be aware of. Let's see.
I think there's a lot of dynamic because you've got a little bit of turf. Like it's the Second Amendment Foundation is in Washington.
Mm-hmm.
And then, there's that every state for themselves. Not so much every state for themselves, like leave you hanging. It's more like, hey, we got to fight over here. We got to fight over here. And then everybody else, it just is not used to being in a fight. Like they're not used to living under infringement. So it's not like that immediacy. So more than often than not, you find lots of people are willing when there's a call to action, but there's just not a motivation to constantly be worried about other people's rights, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it would honestly burn everybody out if that's all we ever talked about, right? But
oh God, yeah.
What I'm going to say is, and I don't want to just blow it off to like, oh, it's a zone thing, like it's their state, so it's their problem. But there's that perception, like the organizations work together, but they're also playing zones. Like it doesn't work if they're all standing on the same thing all the time. So I don't know if it's like, and there's probably a million levels to the dynamics, but to that extent, that's probably a part of it. Is that one of the giant 3-letter organizations that's literally been around since 1971 and 1975 together, is in that state. So they don't anyway. So there's some sort of a turf thing. But what I'm going to also put out there is that one of my frustrations since 2015, after experiencing gun rights policy for the first time, because I had a different understanding of gun rights policy the first time I experienced it, and that's an event that's made by the Second Amendment Foundation under its sister organization, the Citizens Committee for the Right to Keep and Bear Arms, CCKRB or something. That organization pretty much exists to run other organizations or help them, and then do the gun rights policy conference. So basically a traveling event that each year for many years, since like the 80s, would happen in each state, and it would bounce between a gun-friendly and a gun-unfriendly state intentionally. And then it would bring together the organizations, and the representatives of those organizations would sort of do briefs, intel, like seminars, to let each other know about what was happening in the states, what they did, what they accomplished, and what they might need, so that everybody was kind of on track. And this was, in the 80s, way before the internet. So this was a massive, valuable resource. It allowed everybody to physically meet, assemble, see who the other people are in the playing field. Well, that was an awesome thing. And in 2015, when I first started to experience it, I noticed that, or I had the understanding, because I saw a bunch of people go into a room together, and I knew who those people were. And I was like, okay, they're having strategy sessions like off the stage. Awesome. Like there's some major things being accomplished here. And I assumed that that's what was happening. Like the organizations were playing zones or figuring out like, I need help here, or like, let's redistribute resources like generals would between Navy and Army and that kind of thing, right? And Air Force, right? Like distribute resources and help. Well, I don't know if that's what's happening or not, but I definitely don't see that. And it's certainly not a motive, like some sort of unified awareness to the advocates, to the individuals, the volunteers, the people who have skin in the game. And that's something that I'm going to say I wish the Gun Rights Policy Conference offered, but since it doesn't, it's time for someone else to take up that concept, because what we could be doing is every time there's an infringement in a state, mobilizing every other state. Again, there's family in those other states. You've got something in that other state. You buy stuff from that other state. You vacation in another state. You got family, church, company. You got some influence in that other state. And if we started to exercise that influence, it would give those people in non-infringement states something to do and something to accomplish, like wins, right? Understanding that they can be a part of a push-pull. Like, hey, we're going to pull from the state, but if you all can help us push, be great. And now all of a sudden, again, our political adversaries, the people that can push us around, are going to figure out, oh, wait a minute, we can't just push these people around. They're united. They're working together. And it's not like one person did it. It's like they're all figuring out that they can work together and they have fun doing it. So, right? So now, okay, we're going to push on Jersey. We're going to push back against New York. Let's push back against California again. And then it becomes some game of parkour where we're just running around pushing our influence against, and we have to start reining it back. Like, okay, it's time to go after NFA. It's time to go after the 86. It's time to go after, 4473s, make them justify why they even suggest that government knowing everything is somehow better than, spending all this money, $1 billion, 4473s. Where's the safety? Where's the end of crime? Like, justify some of this stuff, and we can mobilize. And that's where, I don't know if we have to wait for a 3-letter organization to offer that, which is going to be tough. Like I say, they're all lawyers. They want to go to court. That's what they do. Or if we're going to see something from the socials, right? People that are used to working together and rallying troops and sharing audiences.
I think we're getting some of that stuff is happening with some of the socials in a combination. The gun rights policy, the event that you're talking about, I wasn't able to go to the last one that happened in person because I couldn't get the time off of work. And I know a lot of people who went there, and then because of all the lockdowns and everything else, it ended up going online. I have heard that there's been some good information with participation and people being able to see the speakers, but I think it needs to be what you're talking about with being able to tap into resources. One of it is networking, is meeting people from other states and things like that. I've been very fortunate to go to Kevin Dixie's Train and Learn. And the interesting thing is I'm the only political activist that goes to the Train and Learn. Everybody else who goes there is generally someone within the firearms industry, whether an instructor or they own a FFL or something similar. So, or they do like social media influencing type of a stuff with their instructions and things like that. I'm the only one who's out now. Rhonda is also doing a lot of this stuff now too with the political stuff out of Mississippi. She and I have been doing a lot of discussions back and forth and answering questions. I think she's at the Solutionary Summit or something similar in Orlando this weekend. In bringing Second Amendment and other information out to the Black community right now to educate them on their rights. And one of the things that she does is entertainers are not leaders. It's one of the things that yes, Rhonda Mary, thank you. Wonderful young woman, wonderful young woman.
Uncensored America this weekend?
Yes, that's where they're at. And that's going to be a very, very interesting thing because they're not saying that they're Democrats. They're not saying that they're Republicans. They're going in on what is going on with my community, how I can fix it, how I can get things taken care of. So what you're talking about with meeting and actually changing, the NRA, ILA, because that's the side that does the political, as we all know, or if people don't know, and the NSSF is new to political activism. They really weren't beforehand. And a lot of people don't realize that. It's only within the last, I want to say 4 or 5 years that the NSSF has really got politically active. And I think that is due to Aero Precision getting them involved with fighting the Tacoma gun and ammo tax. Aero Precision what is in the process of moving to Lakewood, just south of Tacoma, Washington. And at the time that the gun and ammo tax was being proposed, I believe Aero was the third or fourth largest employer in Tacoma. And not a single person on the city council knew that. One of the biggest employers, and they were going to pretty much insult with the gun and ammo tax. I'll say this: when Aero spoke, they had their employees there with them who wanted to participate. It was voluntarily. So every time someone from Aero Precision spoke down for the city council hearing on that, 3/4 of the room stood up and saying, "This is who Aero Precision is." It was great. It was awesome to see that. And it kind of intimidated the city council on it. The bill still passed, the tax, but it's been on hold because they have to complete studies. And there is a qualifier on that tax that if Tacoma loses any business B&O tax, which is business and operating taxes, that sales tax is to be repealed. One FFL is in the plans of leaving, and the other is Aero Precision is moving their entirety of everything, partly due to that and partly due to some other things where the city did not help them, to Lakewood. Lakewood opened just south of Tacoma, open arms, welcome them down there. So Lakewood now has a massive employer to help build that community up. So there's been a lot more networking. Having some of the stuff off of Facebook, like what you're talking, G-Wibs, for people learning for this, for getting the communities and how to outreach. Having events like the gun rights policy conference, having events like Kevin Dixie's Train and Learn, people going to the USCCA event, that also happens, that convention. If you're able to make it, go. Talk to people, meet people. I get questions of, why aren't you at SHOT? I'm in the middle of the legislative session then. Granted, it's remote. That makes life so much easier. I'm too busy with work and with the legislative session to ever go. And oh yeah, they figured that they were Aero Precision. They knew because they were also wearing Aero Precision t-shirts. Meeting people, learning. There's a lot of followers. I will say some of them can't be political on their page, but they will on the social media, but they will repost something in their stories. I'm kind of, I'll say this, I'm humbled at the action and the reboosting that Garand Thumb and Colion Noir have done. It's an honor to me because these two individuals have an outreach that I'll never have because I focus on Washington. They've been able to boost the signal of what we're fighting here in Washington so that people who aren't on Facebook or who aren't on Discord or who aren't on anything else, who maybe follow their favorite Instagram people. They have them on YouTube, so they also follow them on Instagram. They have been boosting the signal, which has been nice. And I do believe it's helped.
Oh,
And
more than that, it's the Arberton window because
yes,
they're into shoes and bikes and guns that cost too much money and like whatever flash and sizzle. So when they, like you just said, I'm not just counting that because you're right. Like they're personally going to get reach, but because they're influencers, literally, people are sharing their stuff, right? And sharing posts that they made that are Second Amendment focused, right? So now that's out in the world where somebody follows them because of the shoe choices or the way that they style their video choices or the age, right? The place in like a, what do you call that? Like a young urban professional, right? Like whatever the yuppie term is now. Like I live in the city, I want to emulate that. Gun rights is part of that lifestyle. That's the Overton window right there. And now it's like, oh, let's put all gun owners in this hole. Nope, not anymore.
Yeah.
It's not that it's changed. It's just that it's now everybody's talking about it. So you can't act like, oh, last minute everybody just gave guns to everybody. No, it's always been like this. It's just that now people are not scared to talk about it and, sharing it more. But anyway, I just wanted to say, like, it's the Overton window shift also in addition to just the reach.
And it's with a lot of this stuff, it's like it's really nice to see this happening. It's and it's a concerted effort. It's taken a long time in Washington to get this type of outreach. There was many a morning in the beginning, like mid-January, where myself, Curtis Bingham from Adventure Protection, even Dan Mitchell from Sporting Systems drove up from Vancouver. We'd be out in front of the Cherbourg building. For those not here, that's the House building. That's the Senate building where the committees are being heard. 5 o'clock in the morning, in the snow, in the cold rain, waiting for the door to open at 7:30. Then we stand in line on the cold marble floor, waiting for the committee hearing to start at 10. 5 hours there waiting for a 2-minute speech, 2 minutes to testify. We had a lot of conversations that happened during that. We would see the buses that were paid for by every town and by Mom's Demand come offloaded with all of their red shirts or their hunter orange shirts also, because that's what they do for gun violence survivor instead of hunter orange. It's like, we need to take that back from them, hunter orange. I hate wearing orange as much as I hate wearing pink, but we have to take that back from them. And
that was an intentional move. That's the Monsanto.
Oh, very intentional. Very, very intentional move of them. We had a lot of conversations of how do we get that organized? How do we get that all together? And it's taken a number of years. We're now at the position where we are having an outreach to where we can mobilize 15,000 unique Washington residents to sign in to oppose a bill. That's 1 out of every 500 adult Washington residents based upon the 2020 census. So when Representative Jim Walsh asked for that number to be read into the official record, I knew there was a reason why. I didn't know at the time. About a week or so later, I went in to take a look at that. And at the bottom of the page of the official summary of SSB 5078, it just says more than 20 people signed in but not testify. The official number was the number of people who signed in against was not added into the official record. Nor was it published by the Olympian, the Seattle Times, the Times Tribune. I caught that. I blasted it. Why wasn't this number added in? Why wasn't this put in there?
Well, yeah, it's because they got ratioed. I can't remember what was the number 4. I can't remember.
Less than 1,000.
Yeah, it was like 8. Wasn't it like 800?
I think the final total may have been just over 900.
Oh, okay.
And that's with duplications removed. And during that, we were going through as we're watching stuff come in. We see that Trudy Inslee signed in as a member of Grandmothers Against Gun Violence. Why is the governor's wife signing in a political advocacy group? And then my question is, are there meetings for that group happening in the governor's mansion where you could have something that, as Jay Inslee's walking by, happen to be talking about bills and what they can do and how they can organize? To me, that is a severe moral and ethical issue on that. And I can say there's been a public records request on that, because the first lady of any state in the government, of the federal government, is an official position. She has an official title. Asking for emails on that. We're asking for records on that. Why is this being done? What is being discussed on state property in the governor's mansion that could be in violation of public meetings? That's also the hard game that's being done. There is some serious back-end work being done right now on public records requests. And I know the politicians are not happy about it. I don't know if it's criminal, because it's a very, very gray area. And I don't know how Washington state law is crafted on something like that. So this was the whole thing. So someone's saying that MDA does the same in Ohio. Yes, they do it everywhere. They do this absolutely everywhere where they try to do something, they will come out. Now, a number of years ago, the Gun Rights Coalition here
We
in
could
Washington
start
had a
filming
rally
that.
that was warm. Pardon?
Sorry to interrupt. That's something that seems like, I know that we had success at an NRA when it was in Indiana, because people knew that it was coming. I remember a bunch of us were live while, waiting for them to show up, because we were curious as it was live. The people were there live. We were curious. Is there any antis? And anyway, and it was basically some stairs across the river from the convention center where the NRA meeting was. They showed up. They stood strategically, or like they arranged themselves on the stairs to have the photographer and everything to give them the best like optical illusion or visual representation of like big number. But it was quite obvious from a different vantage point that this was an engineered photo. And they literally showed up. There's video of this on multiple channels, if I remember correctly, or if they're still out there, where they have video of people standing across at the convention center with like cameras, because this was before phones were capable of doing this. But wait a minute, maybe they must have been phones if we were live streaming. But yeah, zooming across, and people were showing up, kind of gathered, and they claimed that they did it because they were scared of violence. Although they were across the street and no one knew they were coming, they made they didn't tell people when they were showing up. So they showed up, they kind of trickled in, they show up, they spread out, they take this picture and they leave. And then their version of it is, we stood, vigilantly against the violence, and even though we were taunted, and it's this whole like, as the bullets rain down. And then when you get the other perspective, it's like, what are you talking about? It was basically a calm day. So anyway, so we have one version of that, and we never really rubbed their faces in it. We never used that as a rallying call, like remember the NRA show of 2000 and whatever that was. But that's something that we could totally do, and it would be something that some people would relish, right? They would totally savor trying to figure it out and getting that, and then having the accomplishment of filming it. And we should every single time, because it's like you're saying, the busloads of people. It's not like they hide it. Anyway, I'll
No,
sorry
they
to
don't.
interrupt again.
So the man from Tupperware asked a question where the MDA does the same in Ohio and then busts them in. And they do this every time there's a hearing on a pro-gun bill or a pro-freedom anything. Okay, this is something very specific. And the reason when this happens is I believe the MDA, have to double check with this one with Ohio. I know that the Alliance for Gun Responsibility in Washington State is a registered lobbyist in Washington. So what that means when a group is a registered lobbyist, and this actually reverts back to the whole thing on the gun laws. In the fight for a state gun lobby, for the state thing, currently there is only one organization who is a registered lobbyist in all 50 states, and that is ILA, the NRA's legislative branch. They are the only ones. The GOA is not, the FPC is not, the Second Amendment Foundation is not, but the Citizens to Keep and Bear Arms does have a political side for that. There's a reason for that. It depends on whether or not you're a 501c3 or a 50 something. There's another one. There is a political form of a not-for-profit, and then there's a nonprofit where any deductions that you send to it are can be fully tax deductible. There are very, very stringent requirements and legal IRS federal laws that judge how something can be set up as a nonprofit, set up as a political lobbying firm. If your organization is set up as a Second Amendment group that you educate and things like that, you can speak out politically to a point only within how the charter is set up. And this is where you can speak on political things, on political advocacy. So when you are a registered lobbyist within the state that you're in, here in Washington as an example, there is only one, currently there is only one who is. I believe the NSSF is also becoming a registered lobbyist. And what that does, it means you can impanel individuals to speak. It also means you find out what bills are coming up for discussion at your state legislature. So in Ohio, find out who your ILA rep is. Find out when they are receiving the notifications of state committee hearings at your state legislature and volunteer to speak. If you need help on figuring out how to speak, reach out. There are several of us here in Washington who might be able to help, who will be able to help you on speaking to a legislative, keeping your position under a certain time limit. Generally, most of the time it's 2 minutes. I've seen it down to 45 seconds. That's how they know. That's how MDA knows. We get the same notification. Here in Washington, we get 72 hours notice for a committee hearing if a bill is going to be heard. Currently, with it being on the Rules Committee for 5078, and then at the Senate for the other two bills, for the ghost guns and the exemption to carry in municipal buildings, that's a bad bill. Other stuff going on, but don't want to go off on a tangent. We have to pay attention to what's going on the legislative committee hearings for when it's being pulled in. The Speaker of the House can pull it directly from the Rules Committee if she wants to and have it to the floor. It'll be added to the floor session of when it's going to be discussed. But that's where MDA gets the same. That's where they get their information from. So your ILA rep is the individual who should be getting that information. If they're not, ask them why. Push back on them. Why are they not getting this information to to everybody. And in the sense that, so to be able to mobilize individuals.
And
So
squeaky
hopefully that
wheel.
helps.
They'll be like, "Oh, the ILA rep for my state didn't do what I wanted. I guess that's the way the world is," and walk away and start telling everybody how bad the NRA is. You could
Hmm.
just as off. The other alternative is to keep bugging them. Then that
Yes.
person is eventually going to go. People will not shut up about this to whoever's on top of them, and then that person's going to do the same. And that's how things get accomplished. People don't want
Hmm.
to understand they're the drop in the flood, like they're a participant in the thing. And you
Yes.
don't just push a button and have a result. You push a button, you push a button, you push a button. It's not like an elevator button where you're doing it for no reason. This is the system, the process. Like we got to push a bunch of buttons. So what is it? Every Tuesday you're going to get up and push buttons.
Yeah.
A couple of times a week when you're bored, you're going to push buttons. Whatever your system is, just like drinking water or exercising or something. Like come up with something, put it into your routine,
Hmm.
and show people, share with people how your routine is, because that's how we're going to accomplish it. And then, we'll have a new set of challenges. It's not like a finish line. Anyway, so I just wanted to,
Yeah,
Well,
for the men of Tupperware specifically, I don't think he'll have a problem staying on top of the. He's he's very active.
yeah. And something to realize, most ILA reps cover multiple states. Our rep
they're
covers,
probably volunteers too. Are they paid?
they're paid.
Okay.
They're paid.
Then definitely hold them accountable, because that's how we
Yes.
change the NRA, is make the paid people tell their bosses who are also paid.
Yeah. They are the ILA rep that is the actual person who's the contact and everything else is an actual paid position. And there will also be another lobbyist that the NRA will have through ILA, or that ILA will have, who might be a lobbyist for multiple organizations. So, as an example, we have a new ILA rep who came on board last year when Keely Hopkins retired and everything else. And the other individual is Tom Kwesiak. And there are times where Keely was dealing with legislative issues in Arizona or in Idaho or in Oregon, and Tom was the one who had to impanel. Because we were there so often, every time and everything else, Tom would come to us and saying, we need to I need to get people to be in panel to speak on this bill. Who do you suggest? Who would be a good speaker on this? And we would tell him, because we were there all the time and he knew us. That's how I got selected many times with it. Some people suggested that I speak, and the first time I spoke, I was just as heated as Curtis says at 11. Um, and I've been speaking ever since. We're trying to get other people to speak and in Washington, but that's how you do it, is you put pressure on them. It's like, how do I be involved? And how do I be involved? How do I make time? Is your session remote the way we have it currently? And if it is, how can you participate in that? Or do you know somebody who can go down there and is a good speaker? A lot of these moms, their kids are away at school, their kids are graduate or in high school, the moms demand, or they're not in school. They're not in a lot of the stuff that is going on with this. So um it's a huge thing for it. Yeah. Oh, Tony, I love Tony Simon. Tony is one of my favorite people. For saying for who you met out of for who DJ Play Nice met. Um Tony Simon is a wonderful individual out of New Jersey. And you talk about fighting in behind the enemy lines. Yeah, Tony does it. Tony and I will reboost each other's Instagram and social media posts, because that's how we break the algorithm that suppresses the organizing of us in the information. So Yeah, I'll have to read what Mana Tupperware says for their next hearing, for the fourth committee hearing. And that's something to be. And so if you're able to activate for like the fourth committee hearing, that's a major thing, or it could be on a floor vote. Oh, yeah, the Isle of Rep is there. That's something else to be able to activate with people. Post something on, if you're on Instagram, post it, tag me. I'll reboost it. And if I reboost it, others will reboost it. In Ohio, Velocity Vixen is in Ohio. I believe she's in Ohio. Carrie, she will definitely, if she knows what's going on, use her platform and get involved with this. She is the caretaker of a very sick family member, so she's limited on some stuff. That is one of the caveats with her, but she'll use her social media platform to get people together to help fight that in Ohio. So, if you're in Faust's
The Discord.
Discord, I will post you Carrie's information, Carrie's Twitter account and Instagram account. Velocity Vixen is it, and she is a wonderful woman who is a female firearms instructor. Yes, that's her. That is her. Wonderful woman, and love her dearly. And she's in Ohio. She might be able to. She, I know, will help reboost it. She will help work on this and help build what we have here in Washington, because she's been trying to get more active on that too. So this is exactly how we do it. So this is how, what G Webs was talking, this is how we build and change the Overton window. We just did it tonight.
And on that note, I think we're going to start wrapping up.
I got a point from before that I put in the side chat over here. Just to throw in something that you mentioned earlier, and I didn't want I interrupt, but this wasn't like a good point to interrupt or whatever. But you'd mentioned something about the funding and the costs and everything, and I was thinking kind of when you were talking about the gates, I guess, and I never really thought about some of the other players and their motivations, I guess, if they're altruistic or if they're like incorrect in their whatever, or if they're really just anti-gun or something. Like some people are just jerks, right? Some people are like, oh, you know what? I hate gun owners and I'm going to be anti-gun because I got the money. But whatever their motivation is, if they are and you said something about it anyway, so it made me think that if we're in a position where money is at a, when money's a fluctuating thing, like a pendulum or whatever, like a lot of things. And right now money costs a lot of money, right? Values of money is going down. So in other words, if somebody's going to be altruistic, it's easy when you got a lot of money. But when times are tighter, or your value, your pile is worth less, then it might be a time to start scrutinizing what you're spending all this money on. And unless they're really true believers, this might be the time to put screws on that whole strategy or that tactic of addressing the people funding this whole thing. Because like we're talking about, it's frustrating when they can bring a busload of people. Well, that's only when you got bucks to pay for that busload of people. Yeah. We got the same thing. Like, would you want to go sit in a bus for $10 when you're getting paid unemployment? So they're kind of, this is, if you're going to believe the narrative that a whole bunch of people are sitting around getting paid for unemployment, then you must also assume that narrative is going to be, it's tough for them. Just the same way they're not going to go to work. They're not going to get on a bus and go hate guns, because that was just work to them. They didn't truly hate it, right? So if you're going to follow one of these narratives, you got to, understand that this is probably a really good time to fight that money, right? Like challenge them to throw as much money on the table as they possibly can now, if no other reason than now it costs them the most. They spend money out of their trust fund or their pile now, and when it goes back to being the other way and money's worth a lot, they got a heck of a lot less money, and they're going to look back and go, I kept spending that same amount of money on competing and gun owners, and what did I got to pay for it? I can't go on vacation, or I can't own that island, or whatever your fantasy is about these rich people. So anyway, I think I was just going to add to that like we should be thinking about it big picture, like lots of strategies. We got, individuals, we got divisions, we got, Army, Air, Navy, Air Force. We got different ways of approaching this.
Mm-hmm.
And when the iron's hot, right? So when the time is right, I'm repeating myself now. Like that, just I want to throw that in there, that there's that angle. Like this is a good time money wise to go after them or make them stress them out, make them pay now. And it's relatively easy for us to shoot from the bushes, right? To just be memeists and annoying
Yeah.
and make them lose marketing dollars. The more effective we are now, the more it costs them.
Yes.
Right
I need to get back to publishing on Substack again, but I actually, GWebs, what you're talking about, I've actually have some of the research that shows how the gun control groups are not just within the CEO of Levi Strauss, but how they also are in other companies based upon board appointments, who's on a board, who's an overseer on some stuff. There's a lot of interconnectivity with this stuff. And it's the whole thing of, like you say, for follow the money. Levi Strauss actually had to put in their 10K report, and this is something to be aware of. Anybody can read these 10K, these financial and fiscal reports.
And the people that read them have money in the game. Like they care what these companies are doing. So if they start to squawk about something, they're shifting their money because it's that easy. Like, hey, make a phone call and shift that $1 billion out of Levi. They're weird.
Yes. And they actually have something stated in their 10Q that statements and actions by the CEO and the board on social products and things like that, on social or cultural issues, are going to adversely affect the bottom line. That's in their 10Q.
So in other words, hey, we're going to try to make money, but guess what? What we want to do, if it ruins a company or we lose money, oh well, I'm telling you up front.
Yeah, you've been warned. So, and that's the same thing in realizing that people have power more than they realize. Smith & Wesson, Cody, Ruger, God, I'm trying to think of some of the other ones, are all publicly traded stocks. There's nothing to say that the gun community, and granted, I do not give financial advice, there's nothing to say that members of the gun community can't own that stock. There is a group of nuns who are heavy gun control proponents who have taken their retirement and invested it into Smith & Wesson, specifically to try to get Smith & Wesson to become less active in the 2A community. How do we combat that? We as individuals have a choice. Your retirement funds, the California school teachers or the California educators retirement fund, a couple of years ago, divested everything from anything that was 2A related.
And made a big deal about it. Got a lot of motion coverage, like what do you call it, like reach, because of that whole idea.
Yeah. Now, who's to say that that was an agreement for every single educator? Know where your retirement is being invested in. Speak up.
Well, and choose to invest in the companies you care about. So that's an awesome point. The same thing as I thought you were saying something different there, but as you said, it got kind of dark. But the brighter side of that, or the other side is, let's own. I thought you were going to go with own Smith & Wesson so that we get them to quit putting Hillary holes and stuff, right? Like to quit.
They did.
Right.
And that actually hurt their company financially. They had to sell the British company that put that Hillary or that Clinton, whatever it was, on there.
Yep.
Lost so much money that they had to sell Smith & Wesson.
Right. And nobody pays attention to that. We don't consider that a victory because it's a black guy and we are like, oh, we can't get black guys. Let's not talk about it. Well, heck yeah. Let's talk about how a thing took a hit. First off, how annoying was it that somebody else owned it and we just casually let these companies be owned like that? But yeah, that's actually really neat. I like the whole idea, especially when there's these frustrated, just from my awareness, there's some frustrated rich people that had been assuming they were going to just let their money go to the NRA, and then the NRA is being weird. which is probably a good thing because these people are like, well, maybe I won't just let all this money go to the NRA. Now what am I going to do? And that would be neat to see something like, I don't know who to use as an example, the
Palmetto
Buffett guy
State
or something.
Armory.
Well, but somebody to come in and be like the investment guy for 2A and to create some sort of, I don't know what that's called when a company owns a bunch of companies, but just for, like you're saying, the teachers thing, like
Yeah.
make a retirement fund that's 2A, where they literally, their goal is to just run companies with a focus on constitutional, federal level constitutional focus instead of, and then let people retire and invest in the companies and the success of the companies and stuff like that. Anyway, I think that's a neat angle. I never thought about that.
And when you take a look at some of the stuff is follow the companies. Everybody in the industry knows the gun companies. You'll be able to see who owns what. You'll be able to see who owns what companies. Cody is, yeah, 2A investment group. That's one of the ways. And that's what BlackRock is, and that's what Vanguard is. And those are the two biggest stockholding companies, two biggest stockholders in the world. BlackRock also owns a lot of real estate. BlackRock also funds gun control.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Is BlackRock Coffee?
No, that's Black
That's
Rifle.
just coincidence.
Or BlackRock. No, different company. BlackRock
Okay, good.
Investments is a conglomerate who owns a lot of different stuff. But I can see Faust is starting to fall asleep.
You
Well,
sent us the link. So this is you brought this. You sent the link and said, let's talk about history of gun laws. You're lucky we didn't get into racist history because that's a whole nother 3-hour discussion.
and I hate, I don't want to cut it off, but we're going to end up going 8 hours at least.
Oh, yes, easily. One of these days, what we need to do is just set up a time and everything else and really just keep these, because I can't do these all the times with y'all, because my husband would have a shit fit, and I need to spend time with him, but and I tease him because I love him and he's a sweet man, and he's actually one of the reasons why I'm able to do the advocacy that I do. But yeah, let's schedule another time. G-Webs, you and I need to have a talk. I will explode your mind with some of the research that I have. I just have not had a chance to put it in writing. And I'll send you my Substack article that I wrote almost a year ago on this, showing the breakdown from one of the individuals from Levi Strauss over to Panera Bread and another hop over to Buffalo Wild Wings, of what groups are owning what and how all of a sudden these other groups are so anti-gun. It's when you know where to look for this information, it becomes very clear how they've been able to work at that level.
Well, I'm real visual, so I like to put it in like Illustrator and start to put, a dot here, a dot here, a dot here,
Yeah.
and then see that interconnect. And because then, in my mind at least, and I haven't even finished this, but once we get it all down to where we can see all the players on the playing field, then you add motion to it and you start to do one of those flip books like that map that's been going around where, this is the states with CCW laws, the state of CCW laws in the United States, and then they add action to it or motion, where you start showing it, year by year, and then you get even more information from that data. So first we got to figure out who the players are, and then you start to figure out, oh, well, that's Pelosi's who, and that's who's making money off of this, because these people are making money every time they trigger us and every time they fiddle around with our constitutional protected rights. They're making scratch. Like, they're not doing this because they're altruistic. They're making real money. And and once that, there's certain people that are like, I don't care about this. Wait, who's making money? Like, now I care about this. And that's, if nothing else, it's bringing more advocates to our side by shining light.
Definitely, you guys need to get together
Sorry.
and work on some stuff. But so, any last words, G-Webs, before we get out of here?
No, thanks for creating the place to chat. I really appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah, this is wonderful, and I'm glad you sent me the link and everything on this. 10 days to go, people. Oh, 12 days. 12 days to Sendai. 12 days to Sendai in Washington State. That's the end of the legislative session. The 3 bills that are currently active, that's when they die for this session. Keep calling, keep emailing, tell 2 people, have those 2 people tell 2 people, have those 4 people tell 2 people, and like the old Willa Blossom hair commercial from the early 80s, it keeps growing and growing. And that's how we shift the Overton window.
And that's the mag ban, the preemption.
The
What's
mag
third?
ban, the preemption, and the ghost gun.
Yeah.
And if anybody wants to chat later on this, I might, let's see, tomorrow's Sunday. Yeah, husband is going off shooting in the morning. I might do an Instagram live, or I might get onto Rumble and do something on Rumble with it to show what's going on with these bills and why some of these bills are so bad.
But you have an open invitation anytime you want to come on and talk about anything, or just want to come hang out with us.
Mm-hmm.
You are always welcome. You're an awesome lady, and I personally really appreciate your work and your effort.
Thank you. Y'all have me for about another 5 years.
Baron, do you have any last words?
I am fully awake, and I definitely did not nod off an hour ago.
I was wondering if we were going to get a word in edgewise, but thank you for like pausing for every once in a while so that we could say something.
Yeah.
So all I'll say is just to touch on one thing that Sharon was talking about. When you're talking with other people who might have a different opinion than you, very rarely are you ever going to shout somebody into changing their opinion. So no matter how frustrated you are, stay calm, stay focused, stay on point. Other than that, I appreciate everybody who's been on the panel. This was an awesome chat, and I just kind of threw away what we were doing because what was happening was a lot better. And for everybody that was out in the side chat, appreciate it. There's links for everything that we were going to do and some of the stuff we did do. And
well, recycle that. I'm definitely down for having that discussion still, because those points are good to know. It just makes you more competent and capable when you're having conversations with people to know where we stand, like how we got to where we're at. There's only like 12 laws we have to know.
Yeah. So, well, it'll probably work its way back in again. And yeah. So just remember that it's your responsibility to protect your family, protect yourself, and protect your rights. And thanks for tuning in.
I'm still here. It's over. Go home. No.